Thank you, Mayor. The Emeryville City Council and the Mesa Board met in closed session on the items listed on the closed session agenda. For all items under 5.1, an update was provided. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Then we will adjourn this meeting at 7:11. We've got a 4-minute break until our next meeting. It is 7:15 p.m. I'm going to call to order the agenda for the City of Emeryville as a successor agency to the Emeryville Redevelopment Agency. Do we need to call the roll again? All
yes. Right. Councilmember Bowders.
Here.
Councilmember Donahue.
Here.
Councilmember Martinez.
Here.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Here.
And Mayor Medina.
Here. Approval of the final agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Bowders, seconded by Vice Mayor Pats.
Councilmember Bowders. Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. Any ex parte communications to report for this agenda?
Nope.
No. Okay. Any public comment for consent items or items not on the agenda for the successor agency? All right. Seeing none. Do we have a motion for consent?
Move approval. Second.
We've got a motion from Member Bowders and a second from Vice Mayor Pats.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. All right, this meeting is adjourned at 7:16 PM. It is 7:16 PM, and I call to order the City of Emeryville City Council meeting for Tuesday, February 19th. I think we are all still here.
Move the agenda. Second.
All right, we've got a motion by Member Bowders and a second by Vice Mayor Pats for the final agenda.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. Any special orders of the day? Nope. All right, announcement of commissioner committee vacancies.
Nothing new to report tonight, thank you.
All right, council member special announcements or reports on meetings attended. Yes, Member Martinez.
Those of you who use Amazon might have noticed that they now started shipping a lot of things in a white and blue pouch, which I want to tell you is recyclable. If you take off the label and bring it to a grocery store, Chad, you look like you're about to make a note. If you take it to one of the grocery stores where you could recycle filmy plastic bags, those items are recyclable. It's just something that I serve on Stop Waste, but I got upset when they started appearing at my house, and I found out that you can actually dispose of them properly. I also wanted to just promote recycleware.org. One of my colleagues here on council texted me last Sunday and said, what do I do with this refrigerator filter, this water filter from my refrigerator? And I didn't know, but I found out the answer, and you can type in many weird items into recycleware.org, and there's one place in New Jersey called TerraCycle where you can send your refrigerator filters, but it's a good resource. We at Stop Waste, the board that I serve on, we're working on another tool yet to be named, which will have an app for Androids and iPhones, so I'll let you guys know what that is when it comes about, but for the time being, recycleware.org is a good resource for Alameda County.
So you're saying members of the public should not tweet at you directly, but instead go to recycleware?
Oh, no, you should get to me directly because it makes me actually find out the answer.
He will tell you where to recycle.
I will tell you where to recycle things.
Any other special announcements or reports?
Just
Or Pats?
the Alameda County Housing Authority meeting was canceled this month, but I just want to say my thoughts are with the teachers in Oakland who on Thursday will begin their strike. So throw that out there.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. Is there a city manager's report?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Ex parte communications on tonight's agenda. I have a couple. I spoke with representatives from Lime and Skip Scooters.
Received an email from Lime and Skip as well.
Oh, I've also received several emails regarding the parking, but I think they were included in the public.
Yeah, correct. I received those as well.
I also received a phone call from Lime.
Okay.
I received the emails that are in the public record from the scooter lobbying groups, and I've also received several emails from residents and HOAs about the parking item.
All right.
Same for me.
Okay. Public comment for consent agenda items or items not on the agenda. Mr. Carpio, come on down. While he's getting over here, I'll note that there are these comment cards. If you want to comment about a specific item, you can fill one of these out and give them up here, and we can call your name in order.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is André Carpio. I forgot on the first page from the private meeting there is a word that is it says confidential. The camp, the confidential agreement about salary and things like that for the management. And I don't know how do you handle confidential when everything should be public record. And if it's not public record, you can always get the information from the income tax people. It takes a long time, but you get it. And the second item is on the 5.1.3. It's later. The latest one I have is the gift to the city of Oakland of $120,000 for the maintenance of the Oakland Library, and personally, I'm opposed to that for several reasons. First, each time I go there to use the computer, it's always busy. All these kids using it to play game. And second, libraries are outdated. Nobody reads book anymore. Everything comes online. Far more interesting and in deep than the use of library, because in reading a book or whatever, you're limited to what the writer is thinking and the information that he's willing to give away. So RV online, it's a much better, much efficient, and it's up to date. Thank you.
All right. If there's no other public comment for items on the consent agenda or items not on the agenda, do we have a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
I just have a question about one.
Go ahead.
I don't want to pull it. I have a question about 10.3. Should I just dispose of the question now and then move the agenda or the consent agenda? Or how would you like me to?
Can we ask a question about it without pulling it from consent?
I think if you want to discuss it, you should pull it, and then you can have a full discussion on it.
You can do that.
Okay, I'll pull 10.3 and move the rest.
All right, we've got a motion from Member Martinez.
I'll second her motion and withdraw my original.
Excellent, and a second from Vice Mayor Pats.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. All right, item 10.3.
Okay, I just want to say I'm totally 100% in support of of my colleague traveling to Washington, D.C. to advocate for transportation funding. And my question is for our city attorney, why do we need to approve this travel if we're not paying for it? ACTC, the Alameda County Transportation Commission, is picking up the tab on this travel.
Madam Mayor, if I can jump in and answer that.
Oh, please do.
The council rules, which are quoted here, are all out-of-state travel must be pre-authorized by the city council. So that's what your rules say.
Yeah.
It is also
clarify.
possible that there could be a per diem reimbursement for meals that the council member may need. So that's covered by virtue of the council taking this action. He may not. It depends. But your rules are sort of unambiguously stated there. So that's why this item is before you.
All right, I move this item, and please do eat while you go. And thank you for this work that you're doing.
Just a second, I have a clarifying question. When you say all out-of-state travel, like literally anytime we go out of state, or just for like purposes of council?
For purposes of council.
Okay, thank you.
After your vacation.
I'm not going to block you. But since we pulled this, does anyone want to have public comment on Member Bouders going to DC? Going once, going twice. All right. We've got a motion from Member Martinez.
Second.
Second from Member Donahue.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
So
Aye.
vote no, just
Just to block people from going out of town.
no per diem for you.
All right. Oh, we've got a public hearing. I open the public hearing for item 11.1, resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville granting a waiver from the noise ordinance to EAH Housing for Saturday work between February 23rd through August 10th between the hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Let's go ahead and get a presentation.
All right, good evening, Mayor, good evening, Council. I'm here to present the noise waiver that you just mentioned for 3706 San Pablo Avenue. So on January 22nd, 2015, the Planning Commission approved the 87-unit affordable housing development at this location. Originally, the contract completion date for this project was July 15th, 2019, and that was revised to August 14th, 2019, due to unforeseen conditions such as removal of existing billboard and soil abatement at the project site. So the request is for Saturday work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. from Saturday, February 23rd through August 10th. Most of the work will be with hand tools. Mixers for paint, texture, and stucco will be required. The proposed exterior work includes stucco, painting, waterproofing, and paver installation in the courtyard area of the project. And proposed interior work includes drywall, taping, texturing, and painting, and installing other interior finishes. So the work would be inside the existing building. And the parking for the people working on the project would be within the existing parking structure, not on the street or outside of the project. So here's the location of the work on San Pablo Avenue between 37th Street and MacArthur. You can see on the east side of the project there's some existing residential parcels there. So notification was mailed to within 300 feet of the project site, and the legal advertisement was posted in the Tribune. So staff believes that the request for Saturday work is reasonable given the nature of the work, but considering the proximity of the residential units in the back and some of the work being outdoors, staff recommended a 9 a.m. start time instead of an 8 a.m. start time. The applicant is here, or the applicant team rather, is here tonight. Ethan Daniels of EAH Housing would like to address the council, and the project team of Ethan Daniels, Kyan Hakimi, and John Dominguez from EAH Housing and JH Fitzmaurice Inc., the applicants, are available for questions.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Ethan Daniels. Yeah, there we go. Navarre laid it out pretty simply. We lost time at the beginning of the project due to a billboard that needed to come out. That demolition was going to be coordinated by an unaffiliated third party, so we were sort of at their mercy for that schedule. And then we ran into complications with trying to relocate some of the contaminated dirt on the parcel to a sufficient receiving site. So this request is basically to regain that lost time at the very beginning of the project. Like Navarre said, I have two of the members of the contractor with me today. We're happy to answer any questions. And I should note that we've been on schedule since that very initial delay. So this would be for us to make up that time so we can deliver the project on time and on budget.
Okay. Any clarifying questions? All right, then I'm going to open the public hearing at 7:28. I've got 2 speaker cards already. I'll call them, but if you don't have a speaker card, I'll just call you afterwards. First up, Naomi Maisie.
Hello, I'm here to speak on behalf of myself and also have a letter from my roommate.
Oh.
I live directly next to the construction, so my windows face the fence and the construction itself. We are both opposed to this, and for me it's not just the noise, but the fumes make us extremely sick. We have headaches when we go outside, we're nauseous, I'm newly pregnant, and so if I understood, if they're going to do this all the way through to August, working on Saturdays, we can't even go in our yard. We have debris all in our yard. When I go in the yard during the week, there's dust and mist and fumes. I can't even be in my yard. It's really disturbing for my health and of my unborn child to breathe in these fumes as it is. I can't open my windows, and I'm very concerned about this. It's not just the noise, it's chemicals. It's really bad stuff, and breathing it in on another day, and if it's through the summer where we can't even enjoy our yard, it's a big concern for all of us. And unfortunately, I'm the only one in the house, which is directly next to the construction, that could be here. But I also have a letter from my housemate. But that's my concern, because I've been sick, and I'm concerned for my unborn child too. And I don't want to spend another day, Saturday, breathing in fumes.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming. If you want to give the letter to our city clerk so it can be entered into the public comment record. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Next up, I've got Betty.
Hi. You can hear me? Hi, my name is Betty Touche. I live right in back of the project that's been going on for a long time. This is very new about the arrangements coming to work on Saturday, that we put it up. We already put up with it 5 days a week. We've been putting it up with it for 365 days already. But to add another Saturday day to work in the morning, oh, wow, that's impossible. Plus, they already did stucco before they even came here to ask for permission. So our cars in the back got all stuccoed all over already that we're getting fixed now in the process. I talked to the director that works there, and he's assisting us in getting our cars fixed. We do have a lot of concerns on when they start spraying and stuff, because our house is right there. Our house can get the overspray of the paint. My granddaughter suffered with asthma. My daughter suffered with asthma. I do there. We go outside right in the back. The window is right there. We see the property right there. We're right there. We're that house on the corner next door to our neighbor, them. But they never come and see us and tell us anything. If we don't hear anything from you guys, our city of Oakland, the people don't tell us. They don't communicate with us. They just do what they want to do. And it's just been like that. And I hate to say that, but it's just been like that. And I really have a lot of concerns on this next step, what they're finna do. Because we can't breathe from February all the way to August, this chemical. And we're just here with a lot of concerns. It's a lot of concerns. You know, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment for this item? Mr. Carpio?
I was not planning, but I'm going to make a rebuttal to that. This is like EPA, you know, exaggerated poisoning atmosphere. They're concerned about their health and all that, but they're not the worker. The worker are directly exposed to that. I'm talking about between 8 to 12 inches from the spray gun and all that. And when they say chemical, this is wrong. That's not chemical. This is, you know, aggregate, and nobody dies of it, and it doesn't affect asthma. This is exaggerated. This is disturbing. This is disturbing the peace of the worker who are right there, and this is disturbing the peace of the construction company. And this is wrong. I don't like it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment on this item?
Respectfully, just to address the comments previous, with regard to there being chemicals on site, I would note that this project is enrolled in LEED Platinum, which mandates that there are no VOCs or volatile organic compounds used in the construction of the project. So that would, I think, lend credit to there being a minimal amount, if any, chemicals used in the construction. With regard to the first speaker, if there are fumes generated, we believe, I was just discussing with my team, that that's most likely a result of the driving of vehicles in and out of the site. We are certainly willing to reallocate or redirect those vehicles to use MacArthur, which is an unpopulated street. I think that would mitigate the exposure of fumes or perceived chemicals to some of the residents. With regard to the second speaker, we are aware of the minor damage that was dealt to the vehicle that occurred in an overspray of our stucco application. I would consider that an anecdotal situation. We've addressed that with the tenant, and we're fully willing to accommodate or make her whole in that process. So we remain, you know, an open door. We have a construction trailer that is fully open and able for tenants to reach out to us. We've employed our own sort of marketing to those tenants around the area to let them know what the next status of the project is. So if there are concerns, we encourage people to come to us. We can find creative solutions to those issues. The overarching point of this is for us to be done with the project, to deliver it as soon as possible so that we can put it into operation and have this construction process end so they can get back to their normal way of living.
Yeah, Diane, do you have a question?
So I think you answered this question, but I just want to clarify. The exterior paint is low or no VOC?
It should be no VOC.
No VOC. Okay, thank you.
I've got...
I'm sorry, but these people, I've been dealing with them for a long time.
No, we're not, so we can't reopen public comment, but we're going to continue the discussion up here.
We smell paint and I get a headache. It's not cars.
I hear. Okay. Are there any clarifying questions? All right, we're going to close the public hearing at 7:36. Oh, did you want to come and speak? All right, one more.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is John Dominguez. I'm the superintendent for the project. At this point in time of the project, we aren't doing any painting. Everything that's being applied on the exterior of the building is stucco finished cementatious product, so there isn't any painting going on. We have, like Ethan had mentioned, we have an open door policy where anybody within walking distance in the neighborhood can come into our project or into our trailer. Of course, when they come into our trailer, hopefully they come in, with a good attitude. And sometimes that hasn't happened, but nevertheless, we're okay with that because we're there to listen. It's their community. We're working in their community, and for us, as you heard Ethan say, is our #1 priority. But again, we're not painting at all right now. We're driving in the garage because we do park in the garage. But other than that, there's no painting going on. And again, if the neighbors or anybody within the neighborhood want to come over, talk to us, it's not a problem. And like Ethan had said, we can always move workers from the garage onto the MacArthur Avenue or Boulevard, and where there wouldn't be any issue with any kind of fumes from the exhaust of the vehicles. That's all I want to say.
All right, any further public comment? All right, we're going to close this public hearing then at 7:38, and let's move into discussion. Member Martinez.
Sure. So yeah, I just before Mr. Daniels stepped up, I had opened up a browser to look at exterior VOC levels. So I'm glad to hear that there's no VOC in the exterior paint that is going to be used at some point on Saturdays, I assume, because that's what was in the application. VOCs are volatile organic compounds which can make people very sick, and I have no doubt that that something is giving you a headache, and I'm sorry that you're going through that. However, we have actually had many noise waivers come before council in the time that I've been on council, and this one actually gives me the least pause because of the type of work that the applicant has saved for the weekend. Often we will be presented with a noise waiver, especially on the first pass, that has heavy equipment, that has many more workers, that has very noisy work going on, and I appreciate the applicant coming forward with actually something reasonable to do on a Saturday. I've also requested many times when folks have come before us with requests that start at 8 a.m. on Saturdays that is not a reasonable time for people to wake up, and so I want to appreciate staff for signaling to the applicant that 9 o'clock is a much better start time, even for quiet work on the weekend. So in the interest, and I know it can't be comfortable to live next to a construction site for any amount of time, but in the interest of getting it done and getting back on schedule, I'm going to be supporting this waiver.
Any other comments? Member Donahue?
Sometimes, and usually, the scaffolding is around the structure for applying stucco, and the scaffolding usually goes from the ground up to the roof. And often there's construction netting on the outside of the scaffolding. Is that the case with this? Okay. Sometimes the additives to cementitious products can have ammonia off-gassing a little bit. And these are agents that are put into concrete mixes that help the concrete perform better. It controls the thickness of the the mix, but also makes it stronger and makes it better for water penetration. And my question for you is, could you, on the lower floors especially, have plastic tarping in addition to the mesh that would have the air not directly go next door? Is that something that you could accommodate in this situation?
Please use the microphone.
So to answer your question, Councilmember Donahue, what we planned on doing, what happened to Betty's vehicles was an oversight on the behalf of our stucco contractor. What normally happens is that the stucco contractor notifies us, and we know through schedule that they're going to go ahead and, begin the stucco process. Then the stucco contractor goes out and he covers everybody's vehicle within a certain amount of, feet. We can put plastic up. That wouldn't be a problem. At the same time, we can cover people's cars. And that's what we planned on doing. It's unfortunate that happened to Betty's cars. When it did happen, she approached me, and immediately I said, hey, we're going to take care of it. It's our obligation to take care of it. But to answer your question, yeah, we can do something, for sure. We can look into it.
Okay. Member Pats, or Vice Mayor Pats?
I'm okay at the moment. I don't have any comments.
All right. Member Bowders?
I just don't believe that Memorial Day should be a day in which that weekend should not be worked on, no matter what.
Okay. Noted. I've got a couple comments. I do think that this project is an affordable housing development we all want to see come online as quickly as possible. I am very sensitive to the fact that this is going to be disturbing for the neighborhood while it gets built. I really like the idea of redirecting traffic. I think communities with high levels of traffic suffer some of the worst air quality. Is that something that can be done? Is that something that you can do just on Saturdays or all days of the week?
Redirecting traffic.
For the parking to MacArthur, as you had mentioned.
That'll be a little tough, Mayor, due to the fact that we use MacArthur to bring in, company trucks, delivering stuff.
But you can do it on Saturdays at the very least.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, we can use West MacArthur, and we can also use 37th Street. Yeah.
Okay. Can we limit it to West MacArthur?
We can. Yeah, absolutely.
Which does not have residential on it.
Right. There's no residential on West MacArthur.
Okay. So I would note that thank you. I think if they're able to help mitigate that concern by moving the traffic on Saturdays when they're doing Saturday work, I'd like to see that added into our resolution here. And I would also ask that if they're going to be putting stucco up, they do the sides that are going to be closest to affected neighbors when it is cold out and not on days when people might be using their backyard, to start with those areas.
That's unreasonable.
That's unreasonable. Does it all have?
Summertime anyways.
It has to be? Okay. Okay. As much as possible to mitigate concerns onto the neighborhood, but at the very least to move that traffic when you are doing Saturday work is something that I would like to see in here. And I don't know if anyone else agrees with that.
I agree with that, and I would support no work on Memorial Day weekend as well.
Okay. So do we have a motion perhaps that encapsulates both of those?
I will make a motion that encapsulates both of those requests. No work on Memorial Day weekend and diverting parking to MacArthur on Saturdays.
The plastic tarp.
And the plastic tarp that Member Donahue mentioned.
All right. Do we have a second?
I second.
All right. So moved by Member Martinez, seconded by Member Donahue. Call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. All right. Next up, 12.1, resolution of the City Council of Emeryville adopting a framework for paid parking in North Collison Triangle areas.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Let me just clear this up and open up. I'm bringing forward to you tonight a revised approach to paid parking This item has been brought before you over a number of years, actually beginning almost a decade ago, but our most recent efforts, we were last back in October. And at that time, we started to talk about some of the goals we were trying to achieve with parking, and we've revisited them to bring you back an approach that is starting to incrementally address these. Really starting with improving the parking turnover and availability for customers. So looking at our visitor parking program. Ensuring that we have financial sustainability for that parking program. And at the same time, looking at how we improve residents and employees' access to on-street parking close to their home or work site when it's needed. And reducing commuter and special event parking in residential areas. Increase the use of available off-street parking. This has come up as a concern of the community. And increasing the share of residents and employees using commuter modes other than a private vehicle. So how does our parking program start to get us to a different modal split in our transit ridership up? So looking at the parking problem just at that finer nut of visitor access, we've been told throughout this process that visitors have difficulty finding a spot for lunch or coffee, running their errands. And this both has the impact of businesses losing their revenue, but also customers losing access and frustration. And we know that oftentimes employees can be the very ones blocking customer parking. We also have had, under existing conditions, spillover employee parking into residential areas. Residents feeling like they're impacted not only by local employers, but carpoolers, Transbay bus riders, car repair or sales, cars left while others are on vacation, all of sort of the spillover of having no pricing or controls on the area. Pricing, permitting, and transportation demand management, both in our jurisdiction and in adjacents, can address these conflicts or exacerbate them. So we're looking at targeting visitor parking initially, and then being responsive to residential impacts as they're needed, while we build the system financially, technically, and with policy tools for managing curbside parking citywide through incremental and phased interventions. We want to target pricing towards visitor parking near neighborhood serving retail and services, and what we're really doing is focusing on where there are existing green curbs, where they have been, where turnover has been requested and desired, and in additional areas where there aren't yet green curbs, but perhaps there's a new business in the area or someone who is looking for additional turnover. And at the same time, developing the integrated management system for parking, both software and technology, using tools such as automatic license plates reader, smart cards, and pay by phone, so the user experience is better from the start. As I said, this is targeted not only the green curbs and the requested areas, but we're targeting that to the North Hollis and Triangle areas, just those two areas. And the pricing is expected to do a significant price increase after 2 hours to discourage those employees and residents that would be parking in these key destinations. We're looking at both meters and kiosks to be placed where short-term parking is currently, as well as those areas requested. We're looking at varying the technology, so there's been some talk about kiosks and meters, perhaps dual head meters. There are some short segments that we find in North Hollis. When we get to the maps, I'll point some of those out. We might use meters in those areas, and where there are longer blocks, particularly as some areas in the Triangle, we might use kiosks where we have better efficiency. Those kiosks serve about 6 to 8 meters, just about the distance you'd walk back to them. And that's proposed in 260 spots that have existing 2-hour zones, and then another 90 in either cross streets, where 68 are proposed on Adeline, 150 feet back from Adeline to the city border, and then about 20 that have been proposed as requested by businesses. We're not proposing any meters be installed at this time on San Pablo Avenue, but we would enforce the existing green curb there on San Pablo at about 39 spaces. We're also, in this proposal, talking about hiring staff that are also involved with enforcing the existing street sweeping program, the residential parking program, blue, red, white, and yellow curbs as they exist now citywide. And then thinking about how we integrate these other technologies with our kiosks and meters. The initial pricing program is to do $2 an hour, and this could be prorated at 15-minute intervals for the first 2 hours, continuing to use that prorated approach after the first 2 hours, but raising the rate to $7 an hour. Meters or kiosks can accommodate this on their screens, and the signage and the screens and the pay-by-phone app will all help the user experience in being translated that clearly when those changes happen and how those prices would increase. The proposal before you tonight includes these areas of North Hollis. Bright green is the only area that changes are proposed. Those are for these meters with the pricing as proposed to you. Everything else on this map is an existing condition, meaning those red curbs indicated here are where existing prohibitions of parking exist. Where there are no curbs, that is depicted for you. Where there are existing driveways, some of the areas that hasn't been mapped, but some of the areas either where interventions were being made or alternatives had been talked about, we made sure to include driveways. And these 6 blocks circled in purple right here have driveways added to them, the existing conditions updated for them since your staff report was provided to you. So it's no policy intervention, it's just more information. Where the driveways exist, what red curb there might be there, just so for your information. And other infrastructure such as HC transit stops, Emery ground stops, and bike share stations have all been depicted on here to help us understand the context of these meters and what the limitations of them are, some of the blocks that we were looking at previously. Within the triangle, the areas affected are more limited because we are not looking at San Pablo because that would require Cowtown's approval. So in this early initial investment, that seemed like a delaying factor. So it's in the south areas on the streets south of 43rd, 236th, to the east of Adeline, along Adeline, and on Emery. For this proposal that you're seeing tonight, there's been additional outreach to both the Economic Development Advisory Committee and the Public Works and Transportation Committee, and I'll share comments from those committees in a moment. This presentation and the maps have been added to our project website. We've created an email list of about 450 parties that have contacted us about the previous proposal throughout the city. These are businesses and residents, and we provided a flyer as requested for people wanting to post in their neighborhoods. We've received just 5 public comments, written or email, since this new proposal has been put out in the last few weeks. And in summary, from the Economic Development Advisory Committee, the comments we heard were initially concerned about the $2 per hour being too expensive, particularly at restaurants where prices have become an issue for them, and they're concerned about how their customer will react to any additional cost. In response to that, they recommended having an annual review of parking pricing, include surveying the business impact. So looking at, is that really an issue, or has it created more access and benefits? And then they also suggested considering the pricing parking under the Powell Street overpass, and this came up in other comments as well. The Public Works and Transportation Committee had concerns for installations on Horton Street south of Powell, where parking prohibitions may be desired. So there's currently uncontrolled curb, but there might be a desire to expand the red curb in that area rather than adding meters. concern for meters on both sides of 65th. And that area at 65th and Hollis is one of 4 of the city's neighborhood business centers. And so this is really about creating access at that hub. But there was so it's on both sides of the street there. And there was a suggestion of perhaps dispersing those impacts. Asked for the segment on Vallejo and Oakland and a segment on Adeline Street, be 42nd and 43rd. And these are very small segments of 2 or 3 spaces. One is in fact in Oakland. And the one on 42nd and 43rd is in front of residential, and it's just where existing green curb is. And discuss the lack of demand that might indicate pricing should not be proposed for short-term parking on Emery Street, south of the Pack and Save northern driveway. But there was an endorsement of pricing the west side, so not being south of the driveway, but being on both the east and the west side on the north segment of Emery there at Park, or 40th. And then the public comments included from the Transportation Management Association, and they requested that all curbs on Hollis be priced to accommodate a transit lane, or to think about how there's regulations for the length of Hollis, so that as we look at studying transit improvements on that right-of-way, this intervention sets us up to do that. Businesses on Doyle from 61st Street to Powell Street requested that some short-term markings from 59th to Powell be removed and no meters installed in that block, the block where Townhouse is, that currently has green curb. They requested that there be no meters there, but NHI to the block directly north has requested meters in their frontage. Wareham Development has requested, and I believe, so Ratcliffe Architects is on Doyle within those blocks, so that's part of the public record as a letter for them regarding that request there. And then Wareham Development, which is also part of the public record and before you tonight, requested that meters under the power overpass be installed. They noted that an existing green curb is in the northeast block face already, so that area would be consistent with our policy. And that any unregulated spaces on Hollis, much like the TMA, they were consistent in their comments with the TMA, from 59th to Hollis, and then on both sides of 59th from Hollis to Doyle. And they request red curb be converted to paid parking in front of the Heritage Square. And note, this is currently unregulated as across the street, and they noted changes to the the street center line would be needed to consider this. Without consideration of that public comment, the proposal that I presented to you tonight has revenue costs in year 1 of initially $830,000. This is based on the assumption of just getting $2 per hour. We assume nobody's staying over. We're not getting any revenue from violations or overstays. They're doing this 249 days of the year as revenue days, no holidays, no weekends. And we assume that they're occupying on average 5 hours per day. This is a 10% decline in the first year, we've assumed, on the presumption that people will circle a little more in the hopes that they won't have to pay. And by the time they get used to it and learn, if I circle, I still don't find a spot, I'm just going to go straight there and pay, we take off that 10% decline in the forward years. This assumes the 350 meters or 50 kiosks or some mix of thereof, and that, as I said, there'd be no revenue from additional stays. Our costs are assumed at $790,000 per year, with $100,000 in contracts and software, $50,000 in capital replacement, and $640,000 in new hires, and that's based on a manager and 2 parking enforcement officers. We've been very conservative in the building of the assumptions and on the assumptions of the cost, loading significant overhead within that as well. But we kept additional program support. which is estimated at $165,000, and existing staff salaries in community development, public works, and finance outside of the assumptions. So we assume those are costs that won't be paid by parking meters. They'll continue to be supported by the general fund. These projections assume that we will decrease annual revenue because of a loss of revenue from meters because we will lose actual meter spaces, meaning that loading or unloading spot will come in, or somebody will say, I need to put bike share here, or we're doing zip cars here, and maybe we're taking out, or we're doing a development, it's changing the land use adjacent, it's changing the streetscape adjacent. A bike lane goes in, we change to transit lanes. Any of those things, it could be incremental, or it could be one large project that could affect a significant number of parking spaces. But we think the streets that we've proposed this on are less vulnerable. For example, we're not doing meters on San Pablo. We're not doing meters on 40th. Some areas we have significant change proposed on. And our costs are assumed to increase annually due to rising staff costs. So we just put in a 5% escalator in here. This will potentially lead to a structural deficit in the future. We think this can be addressed with revised pricing, potentially, as this is an incremental approach, significant program revisions, or the possibility of citation revenue. The Hollis Street peak hour dedicated transit lane study we propose just be commissioned as a separate study in fiscal year 2019-2020, so the next fiscal year, have that be funded and considered separately from the parking management proposal tonight. Have that consider the San Pablo multimodal improvement spillover, parallel bicycle routing, highest and best use of curb study that we're already commissioning, the off-street parking, 40th transit lane improvements, the Powell street safety improvements in Hollis intersection, and then any operational concerns. What would it take if that really is a time of day peak lane versus dedicated right-of-way? And that be commissioned separately, but done potentially this fiscal year. For the parking management, we see that if you approve the framework tonight, that the next steps include a budget proposal that's coming forward to you in the budget cycle, 3 new FTE proposed in these assumptions, that we as staff continue to work on the grant revisions and extensions. So we've made initial calls about doing so and are awaiting your action tonight to know the appropriate nature of that. Looking at an updated automated license plate reader policy to support the technology seen in this policy and this framework. The master fee schedule needs to be updated to reflect the meter prices. There needs to be a contract for a hearing officer, both for our existing body of work, but at the new work we anticipate. We need ordinances for the meter pricing, locations, and policies. And we need to release an RFP for the technology, installation, and maintenance and operations. Those are anticipated through contracts. These are the steps that need to happen before we can begin the actual implementation of paid parking, education, warning, and enforcement. I have slides that we can use for reference if you want to talk about anything specific here, but this is the action before you tonight.
Okay. Any clarifying questions? Member Martinez?
So would enforcement of street sweeping, blue, red, and yellow curbs be citywide or just in the North Hollis and Triangle areas that we're talking about?
I think the intention is with the staffing that we're proposing that the existing enforcement of the rules of the right-of-way is anticipated citywide.
Okay, thank you. And then in one of the concerns brought up by one of the committees was putting meters on Horton south of Powell, and they brought up that actual prohibitions of parking might be desirable. Can you explain that further, why? I'm not familiar with that stretch off the top of my head. So.
If you look to this map, anything with an orange circle is a committee comment. So if you look at the south left side of this map, right here.
Yes.
There, and my touching it, of course, made it move. There is currently bike lanes in Horton, and there is the potential to, as I understand from the committee discussion, to think about, instead of having parking regulated or unregulated in that area, expanding the red curb which exists north of there through the end of that block.
And what's the staff analysis on that?
We haven't specifically, I mean, it would lose a few spaces of meter in terms of revenue, but there are potential gains in other proposals, such as under the Powell overpass, and identifying existing green curb elsewhere. So it's not significant to the fiscal analysis. We haven't talked with the businesses about whether or not that would be a significant concern to them to lose those spots, however.
Okay. And then one of the other concerns brought up by one of the committees was two sides of the street being metered on 65th, and their recommendation was to help disperse that onto 66th. But I'm looking at the map that that we do have. I see a lot of driveways and not a possibility for that. So is that where is staff at with that suggestion?
We did specifically add the driveways in response to this inquiry and to help illustrate that there aren't a lot of spots to go on to the adjacent streets. Also, staff want to remind the council that where the two sides of the street are proposed are in a star around that north Hollis and 65th, that neighborhood business center. So we do think it's appropriate to demarcate and use the pricing as a way of informing that this is a node of activity and anticipated for visitors.
Okay.
So staff didn't feel a need to make changes to that area.
Great, thank you. Those are my questions, thank you.
Okay. Any other clarifying questions? I do actually have a couple. If you look all the way out on 67th Street on the west side, sorry, one street further, yeah, those little blips of green, is that just because we have green curbs there, or did we have a specific request to have metered parking?
That is just because we have green curb there. There has been no discussion with the business. Currently, there's about triple wide parking there, meaning people are on the curb, in front of the curb, and then within the right-of-way. But that's Gambiano, I think is the business, and it's a yellow curb and then the green curb between their front door and their warehouse to the west, or a separate warehouse to the west.
Okay, and around the corner again, that little blip right until we get to our border? Yeah.
This is next to a retail broker named Creasa, was the initial tenant of the building. I don't know if they're still there to this day. It is between the Emeryville border and a bus stop that's at that near side of that curb. So it's about 2 or 3 spots. And it may be just about, I think at the time, it was that business's front door.
Okay. All right, any other clarifying questions? Okay, thank you, and we will move on to public comment now. I'm going to call the cards in the order that I received them. If you don't have a card, that's fine, you can just go after that. So first up, Ron Silberman.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. I'm going to read a letter from the general manager of the townhouse who could not make it tonight. Dear council members, I am sorry that I cannot be there in person this evening. The proposed addition of parking meters for Doyle Street will severely impact our hourly workers in a negative fiscal way and will hurt our business. Every additional expense has a much more severe impact on hourly wage individuals that is far greater than higher earning workers. The percentage of cost of parking meters out of their paycheck is much higher. This is a disproportionate form of a tax. We have offered free valet parking at lunch for a long time and have absorbed the cost to basically double the capacity of our parking lot and minimize the impact on street parking. Our workers rely on street parking. Is the city going to provide a free alternative nearby? If not, what are these workers supposed to do? Additionally, our block has off-street parking for all of the existing businesses, as well as the one residential property. Thank you, Jeffrey Krober, General Manager, Townhouse Bar and Grill. Now I'm going to speak on my observations here and my comments. I did send Amber an email, actually 2 emails, and I didn't really get answered. And it was specifically in regards to the east side of Doyle Street between 59th and Powell. And it was who was requesting that meters be installed on that side of the street. All of the businesses there have their own off-street parking, and there's one residential I don't know how many units the 2 buildings are, but it's one owner, one piece of property, and they have off-street parking. So I was curious as to why this new piece of legislation in the parking plan was asking for meters on that street. I didn't really get an answer from Amber on that, but that's okay. I think I've expressed, and Mr. Krober's expressed his concern, as well as I think it was the Radcliffe Architects. This piece of complicated legislation or parking plan here looks to me like a very piecemeal proposal. Emeryville has lots of different kinds of users, lots of different neighborhoods, lots of motivations from different businesses and different residents, and I believe everybody has a right to ask for their piece of the pie. And it's obvious that some businesses do need parking meters. It's obvious that some neighborhoods are suffering from various, what they might call outsiders, whether they're commuters or whether they're businesses parking in front of their houses. But I think that this plan is going to be such a complicated plan to initiate and to monitor. And I think that the budgets are it's very obvious that they're not clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, Jeffrey Sears.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, people. I'm here on my, as the president of the Emeryville TMA. So we're all for helping people get out of cars and into transit. We think 2 key things help that to happen. One, causing people who park to have an economic choice that matters, meaning that driving a car has a cost that may make them think about transit. So free parking doesn't necessarily do that. So that's one. Number 2, getting people into transit requires the transit be convenient and efficient, effective. So that goes to another thing I'm going to talk about. In general, the TMA would like to see all of Hollis Corridor controlled in some way. Now, we're not commenting on rates or anything, but we think it needs to be controlled to allow it to have the opportunity to be a transit corridor. By controlling it, you then have the ability to assert, your pricing controls and so forth and figure out how to best use it. But there's a lot of Hollis right now that's left unregulated in this plan. And so you're not going to be able to influence it. And from what we understand of the plan, you'd have to have a whole nother plan come to you to decide how to regulate those blocks. So we encourage you to regulate them now. That also should make it easier if your transit study, which hopefully is going to come soon and be very fruitful, recommends that there's a way to increase the throughput of that for transit. And that would be very important for the Emeryville round. So for both those reasons, we'd like to see those number of blocks on Hollis that aren't regulated controlled in some way. Thank you.
All right, next up, Jennifer Kane.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Jennifer Kane. I work with Wareham Development. We're the development company and the property management company that owns about a dozen lab buildings in the North Hollis area where the paid parking plan is being proposed. We're very much in favor of adding metered parking and enforcement moving forward. I want to thank Amber for all the work she's done. I know she's spent a lot of time trying to balance a lot of different interests. As Jeff said, free street parking encourages people to overuse parking. Right now, we have a lot of employees in our businesses that we know are able to park for free and just leave their car there all day when there's a perfectly suitable and available parking garage that they could be encouraged to move into if the parking on the street was not free. In addition, the lack of enforcement of the current green zones has led to some unsafe conditions, as people have realized that they don't have to not park in the green zones. They've started parking in the fire lanes, they park in the loading zones, and now we have trucks that when they're trying to load and unload, or Lyft drivers when they're dropping people off, basically just double park all over the streets, and it's just a chaotic environment that would really work a lot better if there were enforcement. So the meters will both help regulate the parking and provide the revenue for enforcement, so we're all in favor of that. We're also excited that paid street parking will encourage people to perhaps even use their cars less often, to use the Emery-go-round or some of the other buses and transit options in the area. The one issue, which was highlighted in Amber's presentation that we have, is that there are a few blocks of unregulated parking within a highly regulated area. So it was the area under the Powell Street overpass. There were 3 blocks that have no regulation, and there were 1 or 2 blocks on 59th Street as well. The issue there is what that does is it creates a really unequitable situation in which the first person who arrives there in the morning can basically leave their car there indefinitely. And with regard to the area under Powell Street, I believe that it's not even workers or commuters who are parking there. I think people are storing their cars there. I checked when I left tonight, and it was about 85% occupied, whereas our garage was almost completely empty. So I think people are just leaving their cars there for a long period of time. So we'd like to see meters added in those areas. If they're not, maybe perhaps even immediately put on paid parking. It could be decided later to roll out fees. There could possibly be a system set up where local businesses or residents could get a pass that would allow them to park at the meters without paying. So times and rates can always be adjusted, but we think it's a great idea to get those meters in so that you can respond if you need to going forward. And if the plan is to add the meters later, we just want to know what the time is and what the process will be. And then the final question that we have is with regard to the residential parking, which is in pink on Hollis, and how that will be used. It's not clear in the current plan if that's 1 zone or 2 zones. Thank you.
All right, any other public comment for this item? Mr. Carpio.
I want to take this opportunity to revive our grievances. We spend almost $1.5 million to beautify the senior center, you know, paint job and all kind of thing here. But the area is really parking crisis. You know, on Salem Street and the street where Mr. Martinez lives and all that, there is just no parking there. And if you want to put a parking meter there, then that's going to aggravate the people who use the senior center for their whatever program, dance, whatever, you know, and piano, music, mending, whatever. So there, I think that that area around the senior center, you really have to do something about it, because we have a green zone, a blue zone, and a red zone there, and it's a real mix-up, because if you want to deliver something, you have to double park, triple park. Sometimes the street is all jammed up there, and it frustrates the people who live in that area because they have no parking for themselves, or we block their driveway. So, I mean, I'm asking that if something should be done, something has to be studied real carefully around the senior center. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comment on this item? Oh, we got one.
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to do the card.
Okay.
Is there a way I can project the picture on here real quick?
Yes.
My toggling is not the most advanced, but...
Oh, it's telling us no.
Uh-oh.
Sure. To the rescue. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. All right.
Oh, somebody
So,
looked at cheap.
Mayor and council members, I'm Nasser Azimi, and I run and manage the one and only dispensary in Emeryville. And naturally, we're getting a significant number of customers coming through our facility, being the only retail operation that is servicing the medicinal and recreational needs of the city. This picture sort of exemplifies the dilemma that we're dealing with. And in that context, we seriously urge the city to implement something. And by something, I see that our area is designated as a perfect scenario. There are no residential facilities. We're predominantly all retail. There's Broken Rack, there's Honor Bar, and there is us. So at minimum, you should contemplate implementation of your parking plan within our area, because it is really damaging our ability to generate revenue and support the city in the context of the tax revenue that we promised y'all. I want to thank Amber, Chad, and city manager and all city staff. Really, I admire you for relentlessly pushing through this process, and I also understand the growing pains that the residences are speaking of, but this situation is really damaging our ability to service the city and to essentially do our part in the context of giving back to the community. Please implement some sort of a program, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you. Any more public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, let's move into discussion. Okay, Member Donahue, kick us off.
I would like to consider getting rid of the meters on Doyle Street in front of the townhouse and Radcliffe, because they don't want them. They have their own parking, and putting the equivalent number of those meters under the Powell Street Bridge at around Horton.
May I ask Member Donahue a question?
Oh, you may.
Member Donahue, if we remove the meters at every place somebody who is adjacent to one asks to remove it, would you agree to do that?
No.
Okay, so can I ask why you're proposing it for one?
Well, because these businesses that normally would need meters, because they're retail, and like Radcliffe Architects, for example, they have clients that come and go, and they have existing parking, and they're functioning with what they have. And we can always add it later if these businesses turn over. And so I just don't see, why get them upset if when they should be wanting them if they need them. So I think, for example, what Mr. Azimi was talking about was a clear example of need. Up there, these businesses say they don't have this need.
If I might answer Ron Silberman's question about the follow-up I did with these businesses and add some information about the block north of there. All three businesses on the block that Member Donahue is speaking to did indicate there was no interest in short-term meters. The block to the north, NHI, expressed a positive request for meters. So that I don't think that's been part of the discussion. So I just wanted to let you know that the school with the bike station is on the south end. They have a holdout at the north end of their block, but there are 9 spaces in between those two features, and the school would like to see meters in that location.
Okay. Awesome. All right.
So then I propose we move those spots right north to where they're needed.
Okay. Any other, maybe let's start with general comments about this direction of the parking plan and then get into more individual spots.
Okay, I love the direction of this one.
You love the direction? Okay. Anybody else on the general direction we've shifted with this parking plan?
Yeah, I want to sort of second the idea that this is just so the right way to go. There's some minor things here and there inside, but this simplified plan, I just really appreciate staff's work on. And I was looking at the last one, thinking how a city of our size could be that complicated. This is so straightforward. I really like the direction. I disagree with the comment that this is a complicated plan. It seemed very straightforward and easy to understand. We're putting meters in where there's short-term parking. I like that.
All right, Member Martinez?
I am in support of this, focusing the scope of our parking management plan. I'm eager to get something started, and I will be supporting the resolution tonight. With one, I do have a question, a clarifying question. So there, the resolution refers to Exhibits A and B. Are Exhibits A and B kind of locked into what was published with the agenda, or are Exhibits A and B the further clarified
The
versions?
resolution, as I read it this afternoon, my recollection did give you the ability to make modification. So I believe the resolution is worded as exhibits before you as modified or with any modifications you make this evening.
Including any added detail that staff has provided in terms of driveways and, okay, thank you.
All right. Member Batters, you or me first. We've both been doing a lot of talking about this.
We have. I'd like to hear from you first, Madam Mayor.
All right. I'm really torn on this because I think very much wanted Emeryville to have a comprehensive parking plan. And, to be honest, this is not that. This is a much more straightforward, pared down proposal. And I appreciate that this is a lot easier on implementation. It has the financial aspects answered that were still outstanding from previous plans. And I think it's going to be a lot easier for us to roll out to the public and get initial feedback on. So I really like that. What I don't love is the fact that we know we will be shifting some traffic to residential areas and are just waiting to deal with that later. I think we've discussed that we know there will be residential impacts and we will need to come up with a solution for that later. Perhaps this is the right approach, but I really did like the idea of doing it all at once, the way we know it should be done, with comprehensive for all communities, and starting to make everyone realize that on-street parking is not reserved for individual residents or businesses. That's not how it's paid for, and that's, the city can come up with better uses that make our city a richer, more vibrant place to live. More parking does not make cities better. That's why you live in an urban area, not in the suburbs. And so I'm a little bit torn on it conceptually, just because I do like the concept of coming up with a full comprehensive one. However, the implementation's great here. I think there's several little parking blips, and we can get to that later, where I see outstanding green zones we have where it doesn't make sense to have meters. And we can go through those. There's one on Adeline. There's the two that I asked questions about. For the most part, those I think we should simplify and maybe look at kind of infilling some spaces like the Powell Street under Powell Street, and maybe infilling a little bit along Collison, because if you have paid parking on one side of the street in an unregulated zone across the street, I think it's pretty obvious that people just flip a U-turn in the middle of the street and park on the no-paying section. And perhaps we should work through that a little bit. But that is, I think, kind of at the high level where I'm at with this plan. I think we could expand a little bit more where the paid parking is, and we're really just going to have to be ready to deal with the effects of this.
So I kind of, my primary question was whether there's enough good in this to work with this as a framework, or whether this needs to start over. That's where I'm at. And I'm not sure I'm going to listen further to my colleagues. I'm hearing support for this as a framework, but I would raise these things as concerns for me. I believe that when you look at the general plan and the transit components of the general plan, Hollis needs to have a singular treatment on it in order to be a full realized transit corridor. And so I don't believe that this framework, to the points that the TMA has made, I don't believe this framework does that, and I think that's inconsistent with the general plan and doesn't make for good policy in implementing this proposal. I understand why we chose not to pursue San Pablo Avenue, but the San Pablo revisioning that the county is doing is not going to be in a construction phase for any time soon, and despite the delays that Caltrans may present to us, I believe that this plan needs to actually include San Pablo as well, because that's a transit corridor. We need to treat them consistently. We've removed parking from 40th Street with the actions we've taken to implement transit corridor status on that, and also to provide for bike passage safely for people in the future. And I think that when we start to think about parking, rather than look at this as parking, I look at this as the potential consistent or impediment nature of how we continue to devise and build the city in a way that's consistent with that vision. I agree with statements that were made about incentivizing alternatives to parking. I believe that if you don't price parking at a place where it makes it a disincentive, we haven't done much more than irritate people who will drive and complain about the cost of parking but continue to drive anyway. And if the vision on the city's part is to incentivize transit, and if everybody stops and thinks about how much they complain about traffic and parking, consider whether or not you are part of the problem. If you are circling the block all the time, you have to understand that part of what's going on here is we all have to give ourselves a bit of a road diet in what we do and how often we need to use our vehicles. And so I think that we need to make parking where meters are appropriate. I put a little star by that for the time being. Where meters are appropriate, I think we need to make it worth something to people to have parking. I agree that there are a diverse set of uses in the city, and so you can hear Mr. Azimi's point, and there's absolutely zero residential conflict with him and his neighbors having meters, and then you can be over on Doyle Street or 65th Street, and there is a mix of uses, and different stakeholders and shareholders there have different points of view. So I think this is a very complicated issue, and I agree with Mayor Medina to her comments about I would have preferred a comprehensive plan. That was what we endeavored to do. Obviously, it got a little bit carried away, I think, and it was so complicated to some of the earlier comments that it wasn't feasible to manage or implement. This, to me, is a little short of what I think will actually be a successful plan to implement. So I do believe it has its failings, and so I'm interested in hearing more from my colleagues. If this is a framework people do want to begin with, and you want to go into the details of it, I'm willing to have that conversation, but I just raised those as my opening comments.
Okay. Does anyone want to start getting more into the details of it?
Well, I just wanted to say that this plan gives us the ability to enforce our existing parking citywide. And I think that is such a major positive aspect of the plan. So it will have a significant impact that we have enforcement. And I think that it's simple enough that it is a great way to get started without overdoing it. It gives us room to recover from our mistakes and to make improvements both. So in general, I really feel strongly that we should pass this. And just the one detail that I mentioned before, I would like to move some of that parking on Doyle North where those businesses really would like to have some, and get it away from the businesses that don't want it. That's an easy one we could do right now.
Okay. Member Martinez?
I will second the enforcement aspect of Member Donahue's comments. I live in the Triangle neighborhood where I think that street sweeping hasn't been effective in over a year. You folks can tell me about other parts of the city, but that's what I recognize on the street that I live on. I really do think that the time to begin is now. So if council has the will to go through some more granular detail on some specifics, I would endeavor to do that tonight.
Okay. And, I think we're hearing that there's a majority of the council who wants to get more into this. I'm willing to do that. I think we should, I do agree with Member Bowders' point that we should consider Hollis Street more thoughtfully in terms of a transit priority area for us. And how do we want to rectify that with this plan right now? So I also think, if I may make a request, can we eliminate the green zones on those two little blips above 67th Street? Yep, that one and the border one. I don't think there's going to be any takers for paid parking there.
I'd like to comment on, just say that an area like that has people that need to make a stop for business in the middle of the day. having a little bit of meter action in a place that is parked out just might be useful to those businesses. That's what I like about those two spots, that, it provides occasional visitors a place to go more readily than when there's none.
I would just note that the existing green curbs at that location in the industrial zone of the city exist for a pre-existing reason before we ever contemplated meters. They were put there at the request of 2 business offices in the industrial zone to allow for short-term parking. Now, we've obviously never enforced that, but George Martin's office is on the east end of 67th on the north side of the street there, and I imagine Mr. Martin has clients who visit him periodically, and given that he parks most of his employees off-street and the rest of them park on 67th Street, having dedicated space for a couple spaces to ensure that clients can come and park. I'm sure $2 an hour for a business person to visit Mr. Martin in front of his business is worth it compared to the headache of losing business. So I appreciate what the mayor has asked, but I would just ask her to reconsider that as it relates to that.
To clarify, I was not talking about that blip.
Okay.
I was talking about the ones on the across the street, across Hollis Street. But when I had asked earlier, the one that's
George Martin.
Yeah,
This is Crisa, and this
the border
is
one.
Gaviano.
So the border one, there's no active business there, but there used to be. I'm going to call this the border blip.
No, I think this is an occupied building. I just don't know that the original business that requested the curb is still that business. I don't know the nature of their use of this curb, and I haven't made inquiry.
Okay, I don't have a super strong opinion on these. I was just wondering why those little blips remained. I do have a stronger opinion if we can go to the next page on Adeline.
42nd or 43rd?
Yep, that blip. I actually went out there after I saw this map to look at the green zone. There is a green zone there. It makes 0 sense to me. I think we should remove this.
Okay, clarify where you're talking about.
In between
This is
42nd
right
and 43rd on Adeline, it's just residential housing.
I think for this discussion, I'm just going to move to where the circles are, because it'll start where you've already started to have some of the conversation. It's right here.
Yeah, that's green zone. I don't know why. Does anyone know why that green zone came to be?
I don't. I did look at the adjacencies. It looks like it's residential. There doesn't seem to be any.
There's new retail there, little business, yeah.
What is there?
What's there?
It's a for sale sign.
There's some, I caught my eye, I think there's a little cafe or something there.
No, that's further up the block.
No, that's on 40th.
This is across the street from my home.
I think there used to be childcare.
Okay, I'm thinking yeah, you're right, it's not there.
I asked that we remove that one. It is purely residential. It doesn't make any sense for me.
Madam Mayor, could I just ask a clarifying question? That would be not just not installing a meter, but removing the green zone altogether, correct?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
For that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to go back to earlier comments. I fully support the idea of treating Hollis as one corridor. I don't disagree with that thought at all. I think that's the one thing I definitely agree with. Otherwise, I'm fine with this as was said as a starting point.
And what does treating Hollis as one corridor mean?
Throw that back to the guys, to Member Bowders.
Meaning that it gets a singular treatment, which means if we meter Hollis, we meter all of Hollis north of Powell Street consistently, so there's not blocks where there's people trying to park and cars that stick out from the street that aren't paying for meters, where people are going to say, okay, well, this block has no meters and this one does, so they're choosing which blocks to circle in the morning, which creates impediments. And ultimately, we want people to see that the choice on a transit corridor is there's a bus going down the street, and they can choose to get on the bus or they can choose to pay. There's a very sharp contrast when you treat a transit corridor with pricing on it. I think that's a choice that people have to start thinking about.
So the suggestion,
I would support this idea, that we include that.
Could just, to clarify, Madam Mayor, so if we could just walk block by block, because right now Hollis is green or red with some intervening gray. So if we're understanding, then the council's request is that all of the gray areas would be metered.
Correct.
yes.
So you're not requesting that we remove any of the red zones.
Nope.
It's simply meter all of the gray areas so that they match the current green zones.
Yes.
Yes.
Member Batters? Does that capture the spirit of your?
Yeah, that's I think
That's what I think is a great.
I mean, I'm unhappy that we're not doing the study for the transit corridor consistent. That was something we asked for last June. So I actually had just a couple quick questions if I could ask.
Please do.
One is, why do we feel that we can't do that study consistent with this? Why is that being proposed to be done next year?
It's being proposed in this fiscal year. It's staff preparing the RFP, the scope of the work, and
But it's not in your resolution.
no, because we would bring back the scope for your action.
I believe it belongs in the resolution. My second item is the cost that staff are proposing to absorb through existing staffing, the $165,000 in staff time. Why are we proposing to just absorb that if that's going to create a burden on other internal staffing needs, and why not parse that out? Why are you proposing to absorb that?
We're concerned about the ability of the parking program to sustain itself as it is, given the assumption that costs will increase 5% and revenue will decrease at least 1%. So what I would suggest, we've talked about this, as you can imagine, at length, that we get at least a year's worth of performance and see where we're at before we start shifting existing staffing costs. We also don't know with a real granular level of clarity how much of the existing staffing costs will be needed to continue to manage the program once the new parking manager is assigned.
So there's a potential in out years for the ancillary staffing costs to go down because they become absorbed responsibilities of the manager.
And potentially the revenue to go up if people do stay longer. Because again, remember, this assumes that everybody parks no more than the $2 of the first 2 hours.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to move on to the area underneath the Powell Street overpass, because I think it's come up in committee, it's come from public comment. I think I would like to have that be a paid parking area.
I'd like that controlled as well.
Yeah. I think the challenge we had is we thought that would be longer-term parking, if I'm not mistaken.
That was when we had all those different tiers of types of parking.
So we're saying we're just going to make that 2 hour and then escalating.
Yeah, but I believe this resolution allows us to adjust the pricing as needed.
So we will be coming back to you with ordinance and resolutions for pricing. And given the nature of you adding significant meters proposed on Hollis and Powell, where in broader consideration, there might be some longer-term niches that might be altered pricing in different areas, and we could perhaps bring that back to you.
We're going to come forward with $2 per hour for the first 2 hours and $7 per hour every hour thereafter. How we then ultimately implement the pricing once we get the program installed, that's a different question.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I think that's direction on the underneath the Powell Street Bridge. I would like to consider expanding it across Powell Street to where we've had a strong business request and there is no residential conflicts onto Pelido.
Pelido is green on here.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah,
Can we get,
green.
Can I see it?
It's metered.
It's already metered.
No. And so, Mr. Azimi, if I can capture, what else were you asking for in terms of paid parking on that stretch?
He was agreeing.
Oh, you
with
just
the
like
proposal.
this. You don't. There's no more you want. We're good with that. All right, that area is great.
I do have a couple of questions, if I can, about the orange circles for staff. The area of Horton Street that's identified. This is a set of buildings that are very, very old, and they no south, very bottom orange circle. That one. Yep, that long narrow one.
I see.
So that's a side of Horton Street where there is a cutout. And the sidewalk goes away from the bridge and it comes back out where the Corporation Yard building is. And I'm just curious, have we done a survey of the small businesses, Jared's Pottery, other small artisan groups are there? Do they have parking behind their buildings that they park off-street on?
We have done no survey of these businesses.
Jared's does have off-street parking.
Does? Because I would be concerned if we haven't surveyed small artist businesses that might be their parking, and given that those are very old buildings that don't come with parking. So I just flag that as, I don't know how we capture that, but that would be my first concern. And then my other one is 65th Street. I understand and I agree with you, Amber, about the transit node and the local node there. This one is a particular challenge, in my opinion, because the east side of the street halfway to the Greenway becomes all residential. The south side is all residential. The south side is the Glass House complex. And the north side of the street, halfway down the block, or almost 2/3 of the way down the block, is actually the liquid sugar complex. And so there are garages for both of those buildings. Actually, Liquid Sugar has its own, they all have their own parking. There's a large garage for the Glass House Tower, the podium, and then they all have their own garages. So I don't necessarily believe that they're entitled to just occupy the entire street, but is there a way to balance this better so that people who have guests come have some access to parking on 65th Street? Is there a way, has staff contemplated a way to either shorten the length of that green zone between the Greenway perhaps and the mid-block so that there's some balance in this, or does council feel like that the garages adequately cover this?
I feel like the garages are adequate. Member Pats?
I've got to be quicker. Meters are for business hours. And so if you have guests, other than during business hours, the meters don't apply. So the theory is 9 to 5, there's going to be less demand for guest parking on the street, whereas in the evenings there'll be plenty of parking.
That how everyone feels? Just curious.
Anecdotally talked to residents in Glass House who feel that people who are opposed to metered parking on 65th have second cars when they already have a designated
They have a designated space.
Yeah. And as well as guest parking in their parking garage.
I mean, I feel less concerned about it than I did with the original plan, because the original plan proposed short and long-term meters all over the neighborhood, which really created constraints, and so there aren't other treatments right now on this, so I'm open to hearing people.
I want to remind you also that Glass House includes on their podium floor publicly owned 4-hour parking spaces. So, that's that lot in the past 3 years has become just permanently parked as we have backed off on enforcement measures. I used to be able to get in there and get out with my dry cleaning anytime I wanted. Now you cannot park there during the day because folks in the building figured out there wasn't enforcement. And we actually got a letter here at council when we first started exploring parking enforcement from a resident who was upset that they got a ticket when they had left their car there for a very lengthy amount of time.
Yes.
I have a question about what if we had on 65th Street meters and we changed our mind? Well, we're just not getting any use on the Far East meters. And can we just put a cover over them?
So as the city manager referred to, we will certainly intentionally be reviewing the pricing on an annual, biannual basis and looking at occupancy and looking at the experience. And that could result in revised pricing, that could result in modification. We've also, in our call for technology, particularly to the council members that have been concerned about how comprehensive this is, the RFP we do could open the door on the technology we have available for a structure that is expandable, meaning that the possibility of residential permits could be built into the technology with the license plate readers. The possibility of smart cards use in the meters could be a way to hybridize. To Councilmember Bowder's question of has staff had any consideration of what about when there's residential mixed with meters? We had gotten to some complex solutions and we're not proposing anything in specifics, but there might be a possibility of having smart cards be a way to address both those who do not have credit, need a cashless option for meters, and also any kind of overlay or discounts or programs like that might be implemented in that technology.
I'll also note that we don't have to just have meters. When we're saying meters, we mean parking technology. I've been a very pro-kiosk proponent for the reason that the meters, once you change your mind, become very difficult. If you've noticed, if you drive on Telegraph, where they have meters, where they put in their Complete Streets program, what you'll see is somebody parked on the outer side of the bike lane, and then someone will pull in behind them in the middle of the bike lane because there's a meter there. And even though that meter's covered up and there's tons of flexible bollards and everything, you park next to the meter. It's like a mental signal. San Francisco went to great expense to grind theirs out on Folsom Street when they did their complete streets redesign. So that's why I think we should be very careful what technology we do use. So not just meters. Okay. Any other specific areas of concern we want to get into?
Are we allowed to meter MacArthur Boulevard at the surface level where we have it?
That's Caltrans, right? Caltrans, right? No?
Well, part of it has a green meter on it right now, so.
I don't think that's MacArthur.
That's the MacArthur turn to go down the ramp.
Oh, okay.
Look at this map.
Is that still named MacArthur at that point?
That's West MacArthur Boulevard.
Okay. I think of MacArthur as being underneath it, that's why.
Yeah, no, it's got upper and low, just like Wacker Drive in Chicago.
Never been there.
I wouldn't want to
Wacker
represent
Drive.
that we can do that without doing the research to make sure that's our jurisdiction, but just as a reminder, this resolution is a framework, and we have to come back with an ordinance under state law that actually specifically identifies the locations for restricted parking. So we can certainly do that research and bring back that answer. Councilmember Bowders. Mayor, could we get specific direction on Doyle? The question that had been raised earlier. I didn't
Can I
get
ask another
consensus.
question before we give direction on that?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Amber, could you remind us why Doyle Street between 59th and 61st is uncontrolled?
59th. Doyle Street, on the west side.
On the west side.
north.
I'm sorry, so the concept of this parking plan is just putting meters where there's currently a green zone, correct?
Or a request. So no one on the west side requested it, and there was an existing green zone.
But on the west side, the school and NHI have requested
That's the east side.
On the east side.
On the east side, I'm sorry.
North of 61st, they have requested it, yes.
Okay. But there's room to put meters in between 61st and 59th on the east side of Doyle.
There is currently uncontrolled sidewalk here and here and here, and there is currently green here. There is parking that exists on all four.
That's not correct. There's not parking on all sides of that intersection. The west side between 59th and 61st Street is where the organic garden is, and it goes up along, and there's not parking. There's a little space carved out.
There's bulb outs.
Yes, there's a bulb out, but there's not citywide parking down that block.
Maybe, I wonder if this car's illegally parked in this
There's
picture I'm looking at.
just in front of the little green pad.
Like
That's
right
it.
there.
Yep.
And then,
There's-
I don't know what that car is doing.
There's both yellow and uncontrolled within those bulb outs.
Okay. Like there's like 9 spaces in front of.
And 9 spaces in front of NHI,
Yeah, that
and
side
13 in the block south.
Yeah.
If you turn it all the way around and look up the street.
Mhm.
No.
Yep.
See, there's nothing.
Yeah. But there's no reason why.
Okay.
So I think my comment on Doyle Street is simply that if that employees are parking there for more than 2 hours, they're already breaking the rules. Right? It's a green zone, it's 2-hour parking, therefore they're only reason they're allowed to park there currently is that we don't have any parking enforcement. So putting meters does not change the status of that block.
I think staff.
It just makes it more obvious.
Yeah, would want to know, as was done on Adeline, would the recommendation, if you did not wish to put meters here, would you also be recommending the removal of the 2-hour parking? The curb would become uncontrolled, or?
I'm for putting meters there.
I mean, I frankly think having just one side have meters is like a little odd, and people just go to the other side of the street or the next block, and especially if the next block wants it. My inclination would be to have both sides of Doyle Street for those 2 blocks of meters on them.
You'd meter the whole thing from Powell to 61st?
I mean, yeah, why not? I like consistent treatments. I'm not saying we have to go that far, I'm just saying that's the opposite side of that.
Just thinking of what all the uses are on the blocks right now.
Yeah. And again, I think this is a starting point. I think just treating where we're already limiting parking
It's a good starting point.
is a good start. I don't think our goal was to eliminate all long-term parking. You know, I think the last plan had permit parking there, and, you know, and you could park there on alternate Thursdays and leap years. So I think that this is a nice start.
The last plan had short-term meters at this location.
On both sides?
No, just the location that's...
Right, on the location, yeah. I was talking about the other side where there's nothing.
Okay, I do think we should at least have meters in front of NHI, especially since they've requested it.
I agree.
I agree. I support putting them all the way between 59th and 61st Street.
On the east side.
On the east side. Because it's just them and the school. And the school isn't used as a school anymore. It's used as a YMCA.
It's a preschool.
Yeah, they have a whole parking lot.
They have a whole parking lot, yeah.
So to clarify, that would be the addition of meters on the east side of Doyle after the bike station and all the way up to 61st?
And then I guess the answer to the question we got in the letter was, well, where will people park? I guess on the other side of the street.
Well, there's no other side of the street parking on Doyle between that block is what we're saying.
Oh, I thought you were talking about both blocks.
I was just addressing the question Diane raised about National Institute or Holistic Institute. Like that block, there's nothing on the west side of the street. It's all red curb. So on the east side of the street, they want the treatment. There's no reason to not give it because there's no competing
Okay,
side.
so we're just talking about that one block.
Just talking about that block. I think
Okay.
we should do it myself.
Is everyone in agreement for that block?
Yes.
Yeah, how many people ask you for a meeting?
59th to 61st, yes, but not from 59th to Powell. I see no reason to have meters there.
Member Martinez?
I am not necessarily in favor of striking meters from an area that's already, as Member Pat's, or Vice Mayor Pat's, excuse me, is already a 2-hour parking zone. I think that creating this parking management plan is going to be a delicate balance of being able to make it sustainable and some initial discomfort that hopefully will lead to changes in behavior. So I'm in support of keeping that block regulated.
Just on the one side of the street?
I think that's a fine place to start, yeah.
May I ask a question? So in these two zones that we've, A and B here, that we've got, any place where there's a green curb, right now, we have meters, or you're proposing to have meters, and if we have removed meters in this couple spots where we talked about it, we've also consistently said we're also removing the green curb, right? Is there, from an enforcement perspective, a challenge with having a green curb that has no meters? Do you think that creates a problem for the consumer?
That'll be San Pablo. That'll be the experience on San Pablo, because there's green zones on San Pablo that we'll be enforcing once we have the staff.
About 40 spaces.
Without meters?
Correct.
Okay. Because my question would be, if we wanted to keep 2-hour zones, but we wanted to let the patrons of the townhouse come have their lunch without paying to eat there, like if that was the issue, but you couldn't park there all day, do we create confusion for people if they go a block north to the consistent treatment question? Do we create confusion for them if they think to a block north, there's a meter, and so because there's no meter here, even though the curb is green, I don't have to leave here in 2 hours? Or do we expect that people will now understand that they need to leave? Is there science behind how people think about this?
They could also already go there and eat for free because they have the free valet parking.
Well,
In this world, that becomes employee parking.
Yeah, I think that's actually what's going to happen. Yeah.
The nature of the requests made from the businesses was not that they wanted free short-term parking. They wanted employee parking.
Which is long-term.
Long-term. So that would be no meters, no green curb. And I understood it to be meters, yes or no, was what you were currently considering.
I can be flexible on this one. I mean, we've added a lot of meters to this already.
I just like the meters because they clearly state what's going on.
We hope.
What do you think about this?
Meters versus leaving a green zone.
I know, like stripping
Or just grind it out.
Or grind it out. Just painting it over.
right here?
Yep.
I'm not in favor of that.
You're not in favor of removing the green, like,
Oh, you mean having the meters and grinding out the color?
Having
They'd stay green, but
uncontrolled
it would be
parking.
either meters and green or nothing.
I'm not in favor of nothing.
You'd put the meters.
Yes.
Would you put that on the other side of the street as well, or not?
I would consider that.
That was your thing, or no?
That was my thing, but I'm willing to be flexible, you know?
I didn't think we were looking to eliminate any long-term parking other than along Horton Street. I'm sorry, Hollis, sorry,
Yeah.
apologies. Along Hollis, I didn't think we were looking to eliminate all that long-term parking.
Okay. So allowing one block that could still be long-term on that
Yeah.
one side?
I mean, we were looking to have some turnover, but consistency and such.
Okay.
I don't support doing it on this block, but
You don't support doing what on that block?
I don't support putting meters on this block.
Do you want to do nothing there?
I would do nothing.
Do you want to take away the green zone?
Yes, I would say that there's no 2-hour zone, so it's consistent with the other side of the street.
The other side of the street now has, so you just
No.
have both sides of
Across the street, not
Yeah.
other side.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
The other,
Okay.
across the street from it is uncontrolled, so I would do it consistently then.
Okay.
But I'm just one person, I'm just expressing my point.
There have been 4
You're
opinions
you and
stated,
Scott.
and 2 have been of one voice and 2 have been of the other.
Well, I'm either like pretty all or nothing. So if we're not gonna go for just putting meters on the whole strip consistently, I guess it would, I could consider doing one consistent block without the meters.
Amber, could you tell us how many meters those are between Powell and 59th?
That's
the
13
west side.
meters, and I will note that the first 3 or 4 properties that have green next to them are residential properties.
Okay.
Where there is nowhere else, we have been proposing townhouse, driveway, front porch kind of location, so that is an anomaly.
Okay, and it looks like we would pick up about 8
On the other side of the street.
Yeah,
And we've picked up others around town.
We also did under Powell Street.
and under
Yeah.
Powell Street.
So,
And all the halls.
Yeah. I can support that.
okay.
I'd like to request that we remove it.
All right.
So to confirm then, the consensus is remove the metered parking and the green zone between Powell and 59th on Doyle.
Yeah.
Yes.
An area that came up in comment that you have not spoken to was Emery Street. There had been, the Public Works Committee had talked about there might not be a market for meters here, but that it might make sense to put meters on the west side of the street, here on Emery. I don't know if there's any desire to
That's
discuss
the taco truck, I just gotta say. That's like the taco truck's place.
So don't we want more
There's
turnover?
a local demand for the meters there,
Where the circles are?
yes.
Okay.
So add, but not subtract. Is that accurate?
I'm only speaking to the east side of the street. I'm not, the little tiny circle is the veterinary center, right?
Yes.
There's parking there?
Did they get to park in the lot where the Home Depot and the Ulta Beauty and all that is? Do they have access to parking rights in that lot?
I am not certain of the parking rights there.
Michael, are you familiar with the JP agreement with Bridgeport? Does the veterinary hospital at the corner of Emery and San Pablo, do they have rights to have their guests park in the same lot where Ashley Furniture and Ulta Beauty is?
I don't know what that agreement is in terms of allowing access for that tenant.
We can bring that back with the ordinance as well.
I'm pretty sure all those properties have parking rights.
Through the JPA?
Yeah.
Where's Charlie Bryant when you need him? Sorry, Chad.
No change to the map is,
No change, that's what I'm hearing.
No change.
sounds fair.
All right. Are there any other areas of consideration we want to go through tonight? Have we gotten through it?
We've gotten through it.
All right.
Madam Mayor, could I summarize, just so we're clear what the changes would be on the map?
Go for it.
So on attachment Exhibit A, which is the North Hollis sub-area, add meters on Hollis in all locations that are
Uncontrolled.
uncontrolled, not green, not red, not yellow. Add meters on Powell under the bridge. Add meters on Doyle between 59th and 61st. Remove the green zone on Doyle between Powell and 59th, i.e. add no meters. That's it on that exhibit.
One question I had was, it sounds like we are making no change on Horton, but there were some questions asked of staff, and I don't know.
There was no proposed changes noted by the council on Horton so far.
Oh, do we need to go back to Horton?
No, we're good. There was some,
Great.
yeah, we're good.
On Exhibit B, the only change was removing the green zone on Adeline between 42nd and 43rd, and therefore adding no meter.
Correct.
And getting rid of the green curve.
Yep.
And with that,
Research MacArthur.
Oh, and research MacArthur. Yeah.
and with that, we would make the conforming changes to the exhibits to attach to the resolution if you so chose to adopt it.
Yes, does that capture Mr. Bowders?
I think that the resolution needs to also include on page 3, under the last resolve, there's a series of bullet points that begin on bottom of page 2. I believe that it should include, that this framework includes a commitment to conducting the study for turning Hollis into a complete transit corridor. And I think it also needs to state that there will be, I know we're going to have green curves, but I think we need to actually engage in the process of installing a revenue-generating system on San Pablo Avenue with Caltrans. I think those two things should be added to this.
I agree with that. I think we should be considering San Pablo more proactively.
So could we get some clarity? Is that a direction to install paid parking on San Pablo as part of this implementation? Or just so we're clear on what the legislation is?
No, that's my recommendation.
I think, can we, when we come back with this, get information about what the process would be with Caltrans to do so?
So the direction would, so the alternate language is direct staff to work with Caltrans on what a process would look like to install parking, paid parking on San Pablo?
Yes.
I think Member Bowders wanted something stronger.
I want something stronger than that. I want a commitment to do that on San Pablo. Because all the businesses on San Pablo, you know, talk to me about potentially leaving because they have cars that sit there for weeks. It's literally a parking garage out in pure daylight. And so I understand that we're going to turn existing green zones into enforcement areas, but they should be, no business on San Pablo is going to tell you they would not mind if it was a revenue opportunity for the city in the same time. So, and I just think 2-hour zones, like we're not inviting people to get off San Pablo with their car. And so we're trying to condition people for the future of San Pablo. I just think we should think about it as proactively as we can.
But isn't it true that this is, we have to use these funds now or lose these funds? This could be like a catch-22 problem, given Caltrans's reluctance to move on anything. It just seems like it'd be crazy to set us up to fail.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. We have a framework here to do all the other components, and staff and I met with ACTC, and we are in the process of getting extension on the time to begin the construction of this, so we're not at risk of losing these funds. The county is going to work with us.
So, Madam Mayor, if we could just get some clarification, if that's being added to the resolution, are we then agreeing that we won't implement this until we've completed the plan to install meters on San Pablo? Just so we're clear.
No.
So what is it that we are being directed to do with regard to San Pablo?
I just think I agree with the mayor here. It's just like we can't, Caltrans could hang us up. I think we got to move.
All right, Mr. Pats.
Can I make a suggestion? What if we I think we can easily improve the signage on San Pablo, and this will put in enforcement. So while we won't have the meters, we'll still have a similar effect with people knowing or finding out very quickly that enforcement is there.
There's no revenue.
I understand there's no revenue. We're going to get to the revenue, right? The goal of the revenue is to keep this cost neutral. It's not. We're not looking to generate At least that's my impression. So my comment to you is simply that I want meters on San Pablo as well. I want turnover there. That's going to take some time. I'd like to get this other stuff going. And once this is going, we'll have enforcement that can then enforce on San Pablo. Do you see what I'm saying? So the green zones are there, and enforcement starts happening. It prevents that cars from sitting there from a week because they'll be ticketed and towed.
Yeah, I want to be really clear. I'm not proposing to hold any of this up. I'm saying do all this stuff now. I think there should be a bullet that says the staff will begin the process of pursuing revenue-generating meters on San Pablo, which doesn't mean it has to be done on the same timeline or concurrent. It just, we need to make it clear that we're beginning that so that it's not like it wasn't in the framework. It's a to-do thing, but all these things could be up and running before we even get through the first phase with Caltrans, and as long as we're moving on it, I'm happy with it.
Okay.
Does that provide clarity?
Can we
Begin the process of pursuing revenue-generating meters on San Pablo.
Yes.
would you be okay if we put comma, unless the council eliminates parking on San Pablo in the interim?
Yeah.
Thank you. I've just got another idea I don't want to preclude.
There you go.
That's my last station.
And did I also hear there was direction regarding the Hollis?
Conducting
Transit
study on the
corridor?
Hollis Transit Corridor, yeah.
Yeah.
2 additional bullets. Thank you.
All right. Is that enough direction for you?
We need a vote on the resolution.
Do we have a motion with all of that in there?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion by Vice Mayor Pats and a second by Member Martinez.
Councilmember Bouders?
Madam Mayor, I just want to say on the whole, I want to thank council because I had a lot of reservations, and although I don't think it's perfect, we are agreeing to review it, and so I will vote yes for the framework.
Noted.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Yep.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. Okay, moving forward with a parking plan. Next up, 12.2, because we're just having a transit-rich evening. Introduction and first reading of an ordinance of the City Council for the City of Emeryville adding Chapter 13, Dockless Shared Mobility Systems to Title 4, the Emeryville Municipal Code to establish regulations and new permits to operate dockless shared mobility systems in the public right-of-way. What a title.
Which has to be read again by title only now.
Right.
Oh, I was just warming up.
Do I put
Oh,
my
I don't have
helmet
my
on now?
notes up here. I'm going to have to wing it. Okay.
Throw anything at you.
Good evening, and yeah, as you note, well, I'm Nancy Humphrey with the Public Works, and as you note, this is not unrelated to your previous discussions. It is another part of our efforts to increase active transportation, decrease single-use car trips, and so this is Dockless Shared Mobility Systems. It is not called scooter shares because we don't know what's next. I think there will be other technologies that come. And while right now we're thinking mostly of scooters and also to some extent potentially of dockless bike share, in this case, if another technology comes along that is shared mobility, we will have something in place to regulate it. We could then tweak if necessary. If it's pogo sticks and we have to regulate the height of how high you can jump, we can do that. So, currently there is regulation related to the user and how and where they should ride. They should ride in the street. They cannot ride on the sidewalk. They have to have a driver's license or valid instructional permit. If they are under 18, they have to be wearing a helmet. And EPD is prepared to enforce all of these things, as we have heard from them before. Speaking of which, we were here once before in October speaking about this, and it has also come up at the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee and the Transportation and Public Works Committees. The proposed ordinance we have here has these sections in it, which I'll go through. We're trying to balance the safe and useful deployment of alternate means of transportation. Balance that with the existing uses of the right-of-way and all of the uses, all of the users and all of the uses. So that's why we're looking at all of these different elements. The permit, we would have a permit that's an annual permit. It would be
a permit?
It would be a permit. And we would not initially limit the number of operators that would be welcome. We would not regulate how many vehicles come into the city at any time, but we would regulate how many are deployed each day. And so if you don't know, the way that these systems work is that there are chargers that take them home or take them somewhere every evening, every night, charge them up, and then deploy them again in town. So our requirements would include they've got to deploy them equitably, they've got to keep within the limits the number that are deployed, but if more come in during the day, that's fine. That's the normal use. Get an advantage of them being taken home and redeployed. Another key item that we regulate here is parking. Parking has been one of the things that has caused neighborhoods and communities to become frustrated with these systems. So we do regulate. You've got to park them out of the throughway, out of the pedestrian zone. You can't block curb cuts. You can't block driveways or fire hydrants. You've got to park them out of the way and upright. The devices themselves have to have a lot of information on them for the riders. They've got to tell you what the rules of the road are. You can't ride on the sidewalk. If you're under 18, you've got to wear a helmet. It's got to give you information about how to contact the company about a malfunctioning or problematic device. Our regulations also cover equity, both geographic and economic equity, accessibility for people experiencing disabilities or superpowers, and affordability. We cover a lot of data. This is something that's moving fast. We've worked with our neighboring cities about this a lot, and both Oakland and Berkeley are a little ahead of us on this, and so we're trying to be as compatible with their systems. They're different. Berkeley is limiting the number of providers, Oakland is not. They're different, but we're trying to be as compatible with them as we can because it's a porous situation. It'll be the same providers, and we want it to be as workable for everyone as we can. So the data standard that's currently thought of as the best is called Mobility Data Specification, MDS. It was developed in the city of LA, and it provides us with a number of reporting elements, both live and we can do key performance indicators at intervals, and we ask for that quarterly in the ordinance as it stands. And privacy, obviously, they will need to conform to data privacy standards, and that privacy breaches is one of the reasons we would rescind a permit, revoke a permit. The reporting, as I say, there is real-time reporting that's available on the standard, and periodic KPI reports we would also be getting. We are asking all of the providers to do some community engagement, specifically around safe riding, about equity, about accessibility, affordability, and hearing from the community as well about what their concerns are, what their needs are. So this will be an evolving system. As I indicated before, there are reasons why a permit might be revoked or suspended, and those are detailed in the ordinance. Basically, it's failure to comply with either the law or with the requirements of the ordinance or the permit that we'll be developing. Next steps, if this is approved today, we would have a second reading on March 5th. We will also hope to bring on at the second reading a fee schedule. We are, as you know, we're not going to make money on it. We're trying to cover costs, and staff are currently proposing that the parking management staff could take over the administration and enforcement of this policy as an addition to their work. And that's what I've got for you today. Do you have any questions?
Does anyone have any clarifying questions? Not yet. Okay. Let's hear some public comment on this item. I have a couple of cards here. Let's start off with Marlo Sandler.
Hi, my name is Marla Sandler, and I'm with the Government Partnerships team at Bird Scooters. Thank you very much, Council, for taking the time to hear comment this evening regarding the proposed regulations for dockless shared mobility devices in your city. Bird believes Emeryville is perfectly suited for a shared electric scooter system that gets people out of their cars and gets them around town. We're inspired by your climate action goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% from 2004 levels by 2030, and we hope to be a partner in helping you achieve those goals. Upon review of the draft ordinance, we have a few concerns we'd like to address tonight, with the hopes that we can continue to collaborate with your city staff as this draft ordinance is refined. Our primary concern is around the proposed indemnification language, which we believe would require scooter operators to take on the financial liability for the city's maintenance of public streets and sidewalks that may be in dangerous or defective condition, even though this is entirely outside of Bird's control. Most cities that we work with have adopted reasonable indemnification provisions which do not ask Bird to indemnify the city for its own negligence. We'd welcome the opportunity to work with city staff to refine this language in the draft ordinance to clarify that the city remains responsible for its own streets and sidewalks. Additionally, we applaud Emeryville's interest in promoting transportation affordability. Bird was in part founded to provide a true alternative to car travel that is both affordable and reliable. Based on our experience operating in more than 100 cities around the world, we suggest that Emeryville require all operators to have a low-income program that supports those interests. However, we don't think the city should dictate the specifics of such a program. Bird, for example, offers our One Bird program that allows qualifying individuals to waive the $1 unlock fee and more affordably use our service. Thank you again for your willingness to hear comment tonight, and we look forward to continuing our close work with you and your city staff.
Thank you. Next up, I've got Sam Dreeman.
Hello, Mayor and council members. Thank you very much for taking the time and for hearing this ordinance. Lime operates in over 100 markets and 5 continents around the world. We're very excited to have the opportunity to continue growing our Bay Area presence. We are a local Bay Area company headquartered in San Francisco. As my other industry colleague mentioned, we believe that these shared dockless mobility devices have the chance to provide first last mile options, to provide affordable alternative transportation modes for folks that can't afford more traditional options. And we also have seen them as being capable of replacing car trips, which helps cities achieve climate action, climate reduction goals. We share the concerns as well that my industry colleague mentioned. The indemnification language does pose a potential problem for us, as I imagine it does for other operators. It also it does not appear in the agreement that the City of Emeryville did sign on to with Motivate for its bike share agreement. Likewise, we also believe that there are stipulations that impact businesses and can be better revised through goal-setting language. And I've provided additional details to each of you in earlier comments that are written. Thank you very much. We're very excited to have the opportunity to service Emeryville.
Thank you. Any additional public comment on this item? Come on down.
Hi there. Hi. You know, I've been a big fan of these e-scooters now that I'm commuting in the city now, so they've been wonderful. Going through the draft ordinances, 5 points I just wanted to point out and make some suggestions on. Section 3, subsection E, there should be a requirement not only to encourage helmet use, but to ask the operators provide free or subsidized helmets in the community, as they do in San Francisco, and to ask them to have a local place for community members to pick them up, not just shipping or online, especially because they're so essential to safety. On section 3, subsection I, you know, living at Bay Street, observe Lime scooters oftentimes blocking wheelchair ramps at the curb or the pedestrian right of way. And I'd like to see a more responsive, more stringent response time than 12 hours on the weekends or after business hours. The operator should be held to a 3-hour response time at all times of the day. In addition, operators should be held to a higher customer service standard. Phone support, web support, answering the phones within a certain reasonable amount of time. To give you a quick example, I phoned Ford Go Bike for problems with the dock. 25 minutes on hold, still didn't answer. So we need to hold operators to a higher level of service, especially when a user is standing there trying to get help. Section 4, subsection C, requiring, I believe Skip does this today, requires operators to take photos of the scooters being parked. I think that's important to know that users are in compliance. Section 4, subsection J, around driver's license scanning. A lot of that scanning technology can be wonky, doesn't work all the time. Having some sort of provision to provide an alternative to getting that driver's license to the operators, that would be very, very important for folks, especially who are not necessarily used to technology, for example. And finally, section 5, subsection A, one of the most popular models of e-scooters being used today are Segway 9-bot ES2s. That's a model that a lot of these operators are using. They top out at 18 or 19 miles an hour. I know in the provision there's a 15-mile-an-hour limit. Just wanted to provide some thought around, you know, aligning that speed limit with maybe the capabilities of the scooter, since there really is no scooter on the market that goes above 20 or 22 miles an hour at this point. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Any other public comment on this item? All right, let's go into discussion then. I mean, we've got just a scooter enthusiast over here to my left. Do you want to start, Christian?
I just want to clarify. I signed up online with Lime. They offered free helmets. They were mailed out, and so I got my Lime helmet. So as a scooter user, if you see me in around town, this was not given to me by Lime. I ordered it from them as anybody could. So I want to share that first. I like the ordinance. I like the idea that we're finally getting around to this. I agree with some of the points the last commenter made. I would like to see better usage of the parking. You know, the photo at the end, we capture that in this language, but I think it's really important that we hold users accountable when they park them inappropriately. And I'd like to get data on when those agreements are revoked with users. You know, I work at a school, and every day at the end of the day, I see plenty of people under 18 without driver's license riding them without helmets, and I don't know that there's any enforcement or revocations of people's ability to use them. And so it's one of the data pieces I'd really like to follow up on, because I think if they're not suspending users, you're not enforcing your own policies, and that's a challenge for me. Well, you're looking at me like that.
You advocate for suspending users who allow children to ride scooters?
I do.
Okay.
On the public right-of-way.
That's a bold take.
You know?
Okay.
You're implying I've let my child ride a scooter? How dare you?
I've seen it.
I would just, Mr. Pats, we would not make a parent criminally liable for a truant student. So I would just suggest that might not be the best plan.
I disagree. The parent has to input their credit card and driver's license and put it on the student's device that they pay for. This is not a student's not hijacking the device. It's actually the parent is giving them permission by allowing them to unlock it with a cell phone and a credit card. Right?
Okay.
There's more to it.
I disagree, but that's okay.
Okay, yeah, no, and I'm not saying holding them criminally liable. I'm saying suspend their account.
With the scooter company.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's up next on scooters? Member Martinez.
I don't have strong opinions, but I do want to know from staff if they've had time to digest the letter from Lime and could walk through the concerns, as well as those brought up by the Ms. Sandler, the Bird representative.
Sherry? Sherry, can I get the document up? This way the people, if I can put the document up while we're talking about it, then the people here can see what we're talking about potentially.
Great idea.
Oh, here. Oh, we can do it here.
Yeah. Just put on the overhead.
They want the letter from Lime, right?
Yes, please.
Letter from Lime. And they want, well, now I want
And for Bird, it's indemnification language, and I believe the equity piece she also brought up.
all right, I can use this. I thought I was going to get the one in there. This is it.
Ah, too much.
Too much.
There we go.
No.
So.
And you can make it brief, Nancy.
one thing.
We don't need to spend a lot of time. I believe actually the spirit of the ordinance as written is going in the right direction. I just wanted
Madam Mayor,
a response.
If I could just, are there particular, because the Lime comments were fairly extensive.
So can we start with indemnification? And maybe this is Mr. City Attorney's time to shine in terms of the.
This is what he went to law school for, scooter indemnification.
Talk about indemnification. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Michael Guina, City Attorney. Lime is suggesting, they've suggested two things. They suggested different language, and then they've also suggested, as part of their comments, they've suggested having further conversations with staff to negotiate this. So in the time that we have received these comments this afternoon, staff has had no time to really have those conversations with Lime. So what staff is proposing in the proposed ordinance is a fairly broad indemnification, and I think what the operators are suggesting is that there be a more limited indemnification. So what it really comes, the process then comes down to what the council believes is a better model. I think that, again, the proposal that staff is putting before you provides, the broadest protection to the city. Whether or not that may impact operators from coming in and wanting to operate here, given that our stricter indemnification requirements is unknown. Those are sort of the choices. Now, if the council wants direct staff to go ahead and have those additional conversations with the operators, we can certainly do that, but we would not be able to adopt the first reading tonight, because that would mean that we would probably be coming forward with additional language or different language than what's proposed in your packet this evening.
If I may clarify something, this language was taken is very similar or identical to Oakland's indemnification language?
That's correct. It was modeled on Oakland's.
And can I clarify, Lime and Bird, are you currently operating in Oakland? Not yet?
We're having the same challenge with the city attorney's office in Oakland as we speak about this language.
So are you operating there right now?
Operating there because they've allowed scooter operators to operate while they.
Yeah, we need to.
Sorry, can you use the microphone, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sure. Is that working? Sorry. So
No. Can we? So people at home want to not have to make video man chase you around the room.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so we've been operating in the city of Oakland. They've allowed scooter operators to operate as they've been crafting their ordinance, so it's a de facto pilot essentially. But at the same time, as they've been crafting their ordinance and getting their terms and conditions together for the permit application, we've been going through this, we're having the same conversation with the city attorney's office in Oakland. So we are operating without regulations, and we're waiting for the final terms and conditions for us to then apply for a permit, and then we'll be operating under their permitting program. But this is the same conversation we're having right now, and it's unlike other cities where we operate that it's a broader indemnification that puts us in a situation where we really can't operate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to clarify where this language was coming from.
That was actually the biggest and most important item I wanted to address.
Could I speak about that?
Yes.
I mean, if I am for our city attorney negotiating further with these suppliers of dockless products for our city's use, because I think that it's important that we have enough clarity that these companies can operate here. And I think this is a good technology to have in our streets. I think this will help out all aspects of our city going forward. So I think that we don't want to create all kinds of risks for our city, but at the same time, the representative for Byrd saying that, in effect, the current language would make them responsible for flaws in sidewalks and streets. I mean, that's clearly over the top for a company. They can't operate with that kind of, I mean, if that is true. So I think that our staff needs to spend time with that. And I like what Vice Mayor Pats had to say about asking the companies to revoke parents who have their children riding inappropriately without helmets on sidewalks. I think that would be prudent for us to have that, and it just seems like that would be something these companies could probably do, and I think that's an important message to get across. I have seen numerous small people cruising on sidewalks at 15 miles an hour, blowing by driveways. These are accidents waiting to happen. And so his suggestion, I think, is important. And I would hope that our city would promote this idea, and we could cut a deal with these companies about that.
Okay.
I really appreciate some of the things that Bobby Lee had to say about using these scooters. But I think there's issues with how do you get a low-income user who doesn't have a photo phone to have our city require that photo docking be a part of it. You know, it's a little more complicated. You know, we have to do this so our low-income users can effectively participate in this, but at the same time, we can get good docking and really actively maintain it. So I don't think this is necessarily that easy to do, but the work is, we've got to figure out how to do it. And I appreciate what he said about speed. I think these devices going faster than 15 is not a good idea. 15 seems like a good speed, and I think we should pay attention to that. I think more than that, and boy, I think we could have some real accidents. I appreciate what Mr. Lee said about the after-hours no-response issue, especially when it comes to blocking sidewalks and driveways, and there's got to be something that's a little more responsive after hours. I mean, normally I know that these scooters are taken away and charged, but occasionally that doesn't happen. And so something's got to be done to encourage better compliance after hours. So thank you.
Okay. If I may, you know, I think the city of Emeryville has been kind of going at the exact right speed on this. We have not chosen to as soon as we saw these in our streets, ban them or round them all up and throw them in our public works yard. We've been pretty reasonable about our approach to this. We know these are a thing that are coming to our streets. We've seen them on our streets, and we're like, all right, we're 1.2 square miles in between 2 other cities. Let's make sure we have a reasonable ordinance that meshes with what they are doing. And I really want to thank Nancy, because we've done several meetings on this, and she's always been, you know, I'm going to reach out to the other staff in other cities and see what's going on so we can make sure our ordinance meshes. And I think that's the absolute right approach for this, because we do not have, you know, solid borders in Emeryville, and most of the time people are not always aware when they are in Emeryville. So I'm really happy with that. I think that this ordinance does a lot of things right. I love what we've done with the data section taken from MDS. The one thing I definitely want to add to it is that we should collect route data, which I believe both operators are already used to providing. That was just the one bullet point I didn't see under data, but the rest of it I think is fantastic and in line with other major cities are doing. I frankly would like to figure out what's happening with ADA accessibility. In our contract with Motivate, there has been pretty strict requirements. I sit on the TAC for that committee of how they have decided to implement accessibility while figuring out what their legal obligations to the state of California are. I've not seen anything like that from any scooter company, and that's something that has just not been addressed for me, and something I want to see from the scooter companies when they are applying for permits, how they're going to plan to fill that gap. And I frankly think that Motivate has done a pretty good job of leading the way of like how to provide better accessibility and be inclusive. Should actually note that when Lyft took over the contract, they increased the funding of that program and increased the number of accessible bikes available very recently. So far, I think we're moving in the right direction. I'm open to having more conversations about the indemnification. A lot of these other things about our response times, I think we could possibly move that 12-hour response time on nights and weekends down a bit. 3 hours is good for most of the daytime. But yeah, I think we could shorten that other response time a bit. If you are in a wheelchair or any other sort of mobility device and you are being blocked by a scooter, you cannot necessarily bend over, pick it up, and take it out of your way. You might be stuck there. And that is something that requires real and rapid response. And we should make sure that companies are able to provide that in our city if we are willing to let them be in our sidewalks. On the whole, I think these are great devices that I probably won't replace my daily bike rides with, but they might get more people out of cars and onto streets. As we're building up better multimodal infrastructure, this will get more people to use it, give us more data about where we should best put it. And so that's really the lens through which I view this. This is a way to enrich our multimodal options for our residents. We just need to make sure we have great consumer protections for that. So yeah, those are the items that I'm particularly concerned about. Moving on from Member Bowders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my comments are I support further review of the indemnification provision in this. I support the comments related to Section 3I. I believe that the response time on nights and weekends should be reduced to 6 hours. I support the speed limits that are proposed in the program, and I also support the community member recommendation for making helmets available in the community. I think that safety is one of the biggest pieces here that we need to talk about. I found a couple things in the Lime letter a little humorous. I mean, I'm very sincere with you. I always laugh when people say this provision is onerous and stifles innovation. I think that's what people do when they don't really know what to say. And the reality is that if self-regulation, which is what you're essentially proposing, is your idea of doing this well, we've seen what that's been like for the last few months. So I trip over your scooters going home from this council meeting every night. So I'm not a fan of letting you self-regulate and determining what substantially similar is. Also, I don't know any other vehicle that uses a motor or any type of battery to move people on a public right-of-way that doesn't get regulated or reviewed every time its model is changed. I come from a family of auto workers. I can tell you how that works. So I just want to say that the first recommendation here that was sent to us, I completely disagree with. The other one is the comments about the affordability program. It's completely within the right of the city to determine what the cost and fare should be for low-income people, and the whole point of this program being something that we take up as a council priority right now, to me, is to give people alternatives to transportation. Walking is one of them, biking is one of them, and this is something I see young people engaging, and I think that's a positive thing, and I support that. But I think that needs to be made available to all people, and so to me, the equity component of this program is very, very important. And so if the city staff in their research and work, and I thank you, Nancy, for doing the time on this, think that a $5 fee for a year of unlimited 30-minute rides is an equitable fare for low-income people who are eligible for federal programs like SNAP, I support that, and I don't think we should leave it to the scooter companies to determine that for themselves either. I support removing two things Lime has asked about. On item 4-13.03E, the unique list of identifying numbers, I think that's an onerous burden on any business and company, and I think that should not be a part of this ordinance. I don't know how we would effectively supervise and manage that from an enforcement perspective, and I just don't think it makes sense to put in this ordinance. Likewise, I know the mayor is very supportive of the data collection component, and I support the request that she has. I think that we should look at whether or not that is a monthly requirement, and maybe continue the conversation about what makes it possible from an administrative level for both on the end of the provider of the scooters, but also on our end to actually consume the data and do something meaningful with it. I don't support just collecting data as frequently as possible to collect it. If it can be collected at a more reasonable juncture in time to allow that to be not a burden on staff to constantly process it, I think we have to balance that when we think about our staffing issues. Other than that, I already talked about indemnification. Other than that, I just want to disagree with Councilmember Donahue about the idea of canceling or terminating an account because a child has gone outside the scope, even if the parent has purchased it. My point of view is that the point of children accessing something like this, or young people, children are supposed to be able to be children, and they're supposed to be able to learn from mistakes and live with growing towards adulthood. And I just very strongly believe that when we basically put children in a position where their misuse of something that maybe their parent authorized them to use that could lead in the termination or suspension of an account punishes children, I think it creates a negative stigmatism around alternative transit. I think then they view this as a program they don't want to engage. And so I don't know if you guys have proposed that seriously. I just think it's the wrong way to go in terms of tying some sort of account status to the conduct of children. So I don't support that.
I will note that in the data section it says quarterly reporting.
Oh, I saw something in here that said monthly at some point.
Nancy, is quarterly correct?
Quarterly is correct, but there is...
Mike.
I think you're both correct. I think... Who has it at their fingertips? I think that there was a parking reporting that was monthly, but most of the data was quarterly if it was not real time.
Okay.
.04C is the monthly report on the effectiveness of efforts to enforce proper parking.
The report every month on their efforts is a lot, I think. Quarterly, with everything else, I think would be better.
I'm fine with that change, if everyone else is. Yeah. Data quarterly. I also support removing the ID requirement. Doesn't seem like something that would be super helpful for us to have. So, don't know, is everyone okay with that part?
The ID requirement is
the numbers on the bike.
Oh, yes.
Unique identifier.
Sorry, not your driver's license ID. I should have been more clear on that. Okay, so those are easy ones we can knock out. How about reducing the off-peak usage response time from 12 to 6? Is everyone in favor? Yes. We're all in favor with that change. All right, so those were a lot of things that were brought up. I think the remaining thing is about creating a new regulation over canceling accounts. I think that goes beyond what I've seen in other cities. Have you seen something similar to that?
Sorry, I did not propose that we put that in the ordinance. I was proposing that I want that data. I want to know what enforcement they're doing. And I think this ordinance captured that, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
So.
Are we okay with that one then?
Okay, it looks like I'm the only one that is asking for some enforcement. Yeah, but I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That's a beginning, that we have data on that.
Were there any other requests that we need to capture and give direction on?
Are we all in agreement that staff should take a look at the indemnification and work?
That was the last one I was going to get to. There's not enough little ones. I do agree that we should work on the indemnification if staff thinks that they can look at that and come back with some clarity. I'm seeing some movement over here from the city attorney. I'm seeing a nod.
Which means we're not voting on it tonight.
Our request would be that we carry this over probably to the second meeting in March, so that we can do that work and bring back a revised ordinance for reconsideration as a first reading.
Okay, but when you bring that back, can you include all those little notes that we just made?
Yes, we would bring back a red line that showed the changes that were responsive to all the comments.
Okay, then yes, can we have a motion for that?
I'll move to continue the matter till the second meeting in March with the instruction given by council to staff.
Thank you.
Second.
We've got a motion by Member Bowders, a second by Member Martinez.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Yep.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye.
I'll also note that there was a misnumbering or mislettering that I will fix, so when that jumps out at you next time you look at it.
Oh, I just thought I was getting confused.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Just breezing through this. Next up, 12.3, a resolution of the City Council of City of Emeryville authorizing the city manager to pay compensation to the City of Oakland for the provision of library services 2017-2018 for an amount of $120,000. You're not Pedro.
That is correct. I am your Community Services Director of Last Resort. Mr. Jimenez is on vacation, and I am stepping in for him, which I'm happy to do. I understand this has been a somewhat controversial item in the past. I am before you tonight requesting your authorization to pay the City of Oakland $120,000 for library services for last fiscal year, the 17-18 fiscal year. This is consistent with invoices the City of Oakland has submitted to the City of Emeryville in the past. As noted in the general plan, the branch library serving Emeryville is the Golden Gate branch of the Oakland Public Library System. There have been historically approximately 2,500 to 3,000 Emeryville residents with library cards who can receive services at the Golden Gate branch and also through that at other branch libraries. I understand there have been discussions in the past where Oakland staff have indicated that the cost of those library services are likely to increase somewhat substantially. However, the invoice that we received in whatever the heck it was, November, well actually we received it after that, but it's dated November, was for $120,000. So we are before you tonight requesting authorization to pay that amount, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Question.
Do we have a written contract with the City of Oakland for this?
We do not.
And why do we not?
I do not know. From personal knowledge, I understand there had been conversations and they did not come to fruition, but to some extent may be related, Councilmember Bowders, to information you have that I don't about the discussions about creating a library here in Emeryville.
Thank you, that's my question.
Oh, we'll get to public comment in a second, Betsy. Any other clarifying questions?
Does the having the access to the Oakland libraries give us access to additional cities?
Yes.
Like Berkeley and...
The system, right.
The entire Bay Area system, I guess. Whereas if we didn't have this, we would not, our residents would not have access to these libraries.
That is arguably true.
Any other clarifying questions? Member Martinez.
When was the last time we had an active contract with Oakland?
I don't know. I'd have to research that. I apologize.
Any other clarifying questions? All right, let's open this up for public comment. She's going to beat you, Andre. She's going fast.
Betsy Cooley, resident. So I worked as a volunteer at the library about 7 or 8 years ago, and so that's partially where I became developed some knowledge of the whole thing, and also was involved in the discussions that the school had, and the ECCL, all of the design things that they had going on. And the school board meetings, when they had, they hired at some point some library professionals to look into putting in a library at the CCL, and And I don't know if there was a final report or what actually finally killed it at that point. And then I know just before Cindy Montero left, she was spending time looking into the whole thing. But all I would like to say is that the other library is 2/10 of a mile away. There are a lot of factors. I actually have a couple of times started to send an email detailing a number of the different things that come to me as sort of complications in the whole thing. And maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. But it's just something that hasn't been that easy to get. One of the problems is that if there's a library at the school, there are problems with will it be available to the public during the daytime? Will it be available at night? Will they have to provide security? Because of the security elements at the school, it's difficult to let the general public in during the daytime. And so anyway, there are a lot of things that went on. I know I think that they did have a contract up until about 6 or 7 years ago, and there was a representative on the library commission from Emeryville, and the Oakland Library, the Friends of the Oakland Library had asked me, of the Golden Gate Library, had asked me if I would take over that position because their term had been termed out, and so they asked if they could send my name forward. And at the time, so I said, okay, at the time I was a volunteer there. And so when they sent it forward to the library, they responded and said that, well, our contract had expired and we refused to sign up for a new contract. And if we didn't have a contract, they weren't going to allow anybody, they weren't going to allow a representative. And then I think for the entire 6 or 7 or 8 years that it's been at 120,000. I know when Sabrina started here, I think I had asked her about it. I said I understood that they hadn't paid and they didn't have the contract, and that we were paying 120,000, I think, that year. And she looked into it and said that yes, that was true. And they had been saying all along for quite some time that it was going to go up to 700,000 or 800,000. But one of the other things to take into consideration is that operating a library is extremely expensive. I mean, working there, I could see how many employees they had, shifting things back and forth from different libraries, operating the computer center. Anyway, so it's an expensive operation, and at the very least, I would recommend that you pay this $120,000, and maybe I'll send you more information, and maybe I won't.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any more public comment on this item? Mr. Carpio.
I'm sorry I mentioned this item before, but I want to emphasize that library is an antique way of communication. We have all these electronic innovation there. Everybody has this phone there. Nobody has time to go to the library, and each time I went there, all those kids, they play game, they don't learn anything, they play just game with the machine, and so that costs us $10,000 a month. How about the homeless? We can put 60 homeless in that building. That would be useful. I mean, we have to make sense, I mean, we pay $120,000 for those books nobody reads. The library would go in flame tomorrow, nobody would lose anything. And we have these homeless on the sidewalk. I mean, I'm sorry, but don't vote for it. Take the money back. I'll use it.
Any more public comment on this item? Nope. Okay. All right, let's move on to discussion. Does anyone want to kick us off? All right, Member Bowders.
I may be the only one. I'm going to be voting against this evening if there's a motion to approve it for several reasons. One, this was a topic in 2017 when we did our last budget that caused a lot of heartburn for me. And at the time, the city... That's you, Mr. Carpio.
That's my phone. So.
I know. That's okay. And one of my concerns at that time was that we were asking to expend taxpayer money for something which we don't have a contract for. And this council was very good, and I appreciate their support in our efforts to resolve unpaid taxes due to benefit the people of Emeryville with the Emery-go-round that the school district hadn't paid, which again was something that two people without a contract decided to waive. And we worked with the school district to recoup that funding, which benefits the taxpayers of Emeryville. And so I understand the importance of libraries, and I don't necessarily agree with Mr. Carpio on all of his views on that. But I agree with his final thing, which is I don't think it's the right expenditure to make. If we wanted to negotiate a contract with Oakland, that's fine, but Oakland told us in 2017 that they would increase this to between $780,000 and $820,000. There's no timetable for that. There's no written agreement for that. There's no step-up schedule provided for that. And that poses a real threat to the fiscal well-being of this community. Library services are expensive. I agree with you, Ms. Cooley. Like, they're very expensive to provide, and we have considerations to make. But one of the things that, this isn't on any of the current staff administering the city of Emeryville, but at the time, one of the commitments I got for voting to approve a budget in 2017 that authorized this payment was a commitment to fulfill some sort of vision to take this money for future years and spend it on either developing a library in the space that we had created for a library, or either entering into some other agreement or contract. So 2 years have almost passed, and we haven't done that. And I understand that this is a bill for the last year of arrears, but all those things being said, I just believe that at some point, in order to change the direction of the city and to do the right thing, you have to sometimes make a difficult vote, and so I'm not voting for this evening.
Any other comments? Member Martinez.
I will agree with the premise of your vote. However, I do think since this payment is budgeted and it's in arrears, I'm going to vote for it. However, we need to resolve this issue, whether it be a new contract with Oakland, whether it be progress on a library here in town. I think staff knows that very clearly. I'll be voting for it.
Any other comments?
It means a lot to the 2,500 people in Emeryville who have library cards, that we continue to have some access for them to the whole library system. And so I'll be voting for this. I agree that it's not good to operate without a contract, and that we need to figure out something, some minimum library for our city that will allow us to be a part of the greater library system around in our surrounding cities. And I think we should just pay this and get a library for ourselves soon.
Vice Mayor?
So I think that what Member Martinez and Member Donahue said is exactly right. I agree with Member Bowders that we need to get a contract in place. We have a new city manager who I think has a good reputation with Oakland, and if we send her with check in hand to get us a contract, we're in a better position than if we send her with no check in hand. So I'm going to be supporting this payment, but I understand and respect where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think I have very similar sentiments. I also volunteered in the library throughout high school. I still like books, and I refuse to use a Kindle, Mr. Carpio. I think books are of great value, and I think access to a library is a significant value to our community. People don't just play games there. People type resumes there when they don't have a home computer. There's a lot of important things that libraries do provide, and I do think we need to obviously come up with a contract for this. But I would be hard-pressed to feel inclined to take money out of a system that I know is already operating on a shoestring budget and relying on 14-year-olds like me to clean up books, because that's the only extra staff they can get. So I will be in support of this. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I second.
All right, got a motion from Vice Mayor Pats, and we've got a second from Member Donahue.
Councilmember Bowders?
No.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina?
Aye. Okay. And that takes us to department head reports. There's no Charlie, so this should be quick.
Have none.
We got no department head reports. All right, future agenda item requests from other council members, Nope. All right, let's adjourn. It's 10:04, 3 hours.